Chapter 349. The monster's words made the group of humans feel as if they had been pardoned. They all turned around and ran as if they were afraid that the monster would go back on its words. After the pursuers scattered, the monster's gaze landed on Lin Yuan. It asked, "Since you know the language of the ancient demon court, it means that you and I are of the same origin. But why do I feel so unfamiliar with your bloodline? Which branch do you belong to?" Lin Yuan was speechless. Suddenly the air quietened down. In Lin Yuan's previous life, Lin Yuan could have dug up the family tree and talked to the monster. But now, the water dragon bloodline in his body was given by the system. There was no clan behind him. How could he belong to any branch? Even if he was sure that the monster and the relic came from the mythical system of his previous life, those legends were still too far away from ordinary people. The so-called scholars had their own opinions. It seemed like there was a complete system, but strictly speaking, there was only a name of the god system. Even the authority of some gods was still being debated. Seeing that Lin Yuan was silent, the monster laughed dryly and said bitterly, "Since you don't want to say, then forget it. Anyway, my brain is getting worse. Even if you tell me, I might not be able to remember. I just thought that I saw the descendant of an old friend. That's why I asked." Lin Yuan's polite smile was a little awkward. He watched as the monster and the relic returned to the depths of the water. Lin Yuan exhaled a long breath of foul air. So, the ancient demon court really existed? Damn it. Lin Yuan was shocked. Although the ancient existences on the Qianhu continent did not appear, it did not mean that they did not exist. Just like the system said, there might not be many true dragons in the dragon palace of the four seas. There might not be many of them, and there might not be any of them at all. Lin Yuan did not doubt that ever since he used the ancient demon court as a banner, some of the ancient powers had already seen him as a thorn in their side. On the other side, xianxia, who had passed through the door of the secret realm, broke a giant worm that was almost 300 meters long with his halberd. His gaze fell on the broken walls around him, and a look of contemplation appeared in his eyes. This damned place. Why was it randomly teleported? Without a map of this secret realm, there was nothing that could lead the way. Xianxia was like a blind man crossing a river in this secret realm. He had no idea what to do next or where he should go. Roar. 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 Beast roars could be heard one after another. Xianxia raised his halberd impatiently, his eyes filled with coldness. The demon beasts in this underwater secret realm were like maggots. Even if he slaughtered a large number of them, there would still be a beast king that would gather more demon beasts to kill him. Even if it was useless every time, these demon beasts still wouldn't stop. In less than a day, the good impression that Xianxia had for these demon beasts was quickly worn away. Right now, he only wanted to find that black snake as soon as possible. After confirming what he wanted to confirm, he would immediately leave this damn place and do what he needed to do. He did not want to waste time here with a group of beasts. Suddenly Xianxia's eyebrows twitched. Xianxia's figure flashed and disappeared from where he was standing, leaving a long trench in the water. In an instant, he appeared in front of the group of demonic beasts that had gathered. In just one move, he knocked the leading demonic beast king to the ground. Without waiting for the other party to struggle, Xianxia stepped on the demonic beast king's head. Under the terrifying difference in strength, the demonic beast king instantly gave up struggling and obediently closed its eyes to await its death. However, the death that it imagined did not come. The beast king opened its eyes and looked at the powerful human in confusion. A while ago, a large group of humans and a black snake entered this place. If you can find me, you can definitely find them. Tell me, where are they? Xianxia had a kind smile on his face, even revealing 2 rows of white teeth. The demonic beasts in the secret territory were all like radars. No matter where he hid, those demonic beasts would quickly find him. Otherwise he wouldn't have hated these guys so much. They were all like psoriasis that he couldn't get rid of. Tell me, where are they, and I will let you go, understand? Xianxia tried his best to resist the urge to stomp the beast king to death and continued to speak with a kind tone. Even the weakest demon beast in the secret realm had the cultivation of the wisdom state. Therefore, Xianxia was sure that these demon beasts had the ability to communicate. If they were just a group of guys who only knew how to kill, they would not have gathered such a large group of demon beasts to hunt him down. Moreover, after he controlled the beast king, those demon beasts would not be stunned in place, afraid that they would provoke him and cause him to kill the beast king. After a moment of silence, the beast king pointed in a direction and said, "The outsiders you mentioned were in the silver-scaled fish's territory some time ago. We have strict rules here. I can't enter the silver-scaled fish's territory, so you can only go there yourself. Even if they aren't there, you can still get some information from the silver-scaled fish. Silver-scaled fish? Looking in the direction the Beast King pointed, xianxia nodded. Then he stomped his foot heavily, sending the Beast King who was willing to cooperate with him to the underworld. Xianxia waved his halberd, stirring up a large amount of water currents. His gaze fell on the demon beasts who were enraged by the death of the Beast King. The corner of his mouth curled up slightly and he said in a cold voice, "A bunch of trash, you can obviously communicate with me but all of you shut up and chased after me. You really think I have a good temper?" Now, the hunter and the prey have switched places. Previously, Xianxia had thought of using his cultivation base to quickly patrol around this secret realm. However, Xianxia could faintly sense a dangerous aura coming from several directions. Hence he had to move very slowly. Along the way he had slaughtered 2 to 3 demonic beasts. Only then did he meet a fellow who was willing to communicate with him. Now that he had obtained the information he wanted, those demonic beasts who had been chasing after him for a period of time would naturally have to suffer his revenge. The halberd danced and the water currents surged. Countless demon beasts were torn to pieces under Xianxia's slaughter, and a large amount of blood mist spread out. 10 minutes later, Xianxia finished off the last secret realm demon beast with his halberd. Only then did he stop his slaughter. Standing on the spot, he took 2 deep breaths and the redness on his face faded a little. He sighed and said, "Looks like I am really getting old. Such a small amount of exercise, even if I were 20 years younger, it would not even be considered a warm-up. Now I am actually starting to pant. If there are more, I will continue to add more chapters." Now that there are no more chapters, the author is trying his best to write. Chapter 350. 3 days had passed since Lin Yuan recovered from his weakened state. In these 3 days, there were cultivators standing at the edge of this water area every day, looking at Lin Yuan from afar. These people had already offended Lin Yuan. Naturally, they didn't want Lin Yuan to leave this secret realm alive. So every day, they hoped that Lin Yuan would leave this dangerous water area as soon as possible. Even if he didn't want to enter a place that had been explored, he should at least enter another unexplored water area, right? Without that monster as a foreign aid, although Xuanhuan and Xuanhuan weren't easy to deal with, they weren't put in the eyes of the 4 Heaven Dipper realm experts. Even if there was a certain gap in strength between the two sides, they always had a certain advantage when fighting 4 against 2. It's almost time to end it. A cold light flashed in Lin Yuan's heterochromatic eyes. Xuanhuan and Xuanhuan who were meditating were shocked. Their eyes fell on Lin Yuan at the same time. They didn't have a good time during this period. In order to explore the secret realm, they prepared enough materials. However, Lin Yuan also explained the situation to them later so they knew what the monster was. Things like becoming a demon were not rare in the Jianghu continent. It was impossible for existences like Xuanhuan and Xuanhuan to not have seen the purgatory beasts. Even if they didn't encounter it, once a purgatory beast appeared in the nearby area, they would be recruited as a fighting force to participate in the battle. So in their eyes, that monster was an existence that was about to become a purgatory beast and was still struggling. They were worried these 2 days that the monster couldn't keep its mind and directly became a purgatory beast. Then, it would directly lose its mind and attack them. Originally, the monster's strength was already above them. Once it became a purgatory beast, its strength would increase by leaps and bounds. At that time, if they joined forces to fight against it, they might end up being killed in an instant. Now that Lin Yuan looked like he had recovered, Xuanhuan and Xuanhuan suddenly became excited. If they continued to stay in this damn place, they might drive themselves crazy first. "Carry me to that water area." Lin Yuan and the 2 of them looked at each other and exhorted softly. At this time, if Lin Yuan continued to go deeper into the waters, the pursuers would certainly not dare to follow him. Moreover, Lin Yuan did not have the courage to explore deeper. This time he encountered a black tortoise that had turned into a demon. There was also a Saraira here to restrain it and prevent it from completely losing its mind. Therefore this was Lin Yuan's luck. However, something like luck could be used but one could never rely on it. This was because no one knew if good luck would favor them next time. However, if Lin Yuan were to return to the waters they had explored, there was no way those cultivators wouldn't have guessed that Lin Yuan had already recovered, given how astute those cultivators were. Even though it took half a month for Lin Yuan to recover among the dragon-blooded monsters they had captured in the past, they would still choose to send some airborne realm cultivators to test Lin Yuan out of safety concerns. They might not even show their faces. However, if Xuanhuan and Xuanhuan were to carry Lin Yuan to another unexplored water area, they might still not be able to avoid being tested by the monsters. However, it was certain that all 4 heavenly strength realm cultivators would show up. After all, monsters were very sensitive to their own territories. Lin Yuan had used the language of Earth to communicate with the monster and the Saraira. Naturally, they did not know the specific content. However, judging from Lin Yuan's behavior for the past 2 days, they guessed that the terrifying monster did not intend to let Lin Yuan set foot in its territory. Therefore, at this time, it was completely reasonable for Lin Yuan to take the risk to go through other unknown water areas and then achieve his goal of staying away from them. Okay. Xuanhuan and Shui Yan looked at each other and both of them became alert. As usual, one of them lifted Lin Yuan and the other carried him by his tail and strode to another unknown water area. In fact, it could not be said that it was unknown. After Lin Yuan's Eye of God passive effect was activated, he could directly see the situation in that water area. After all, not all monsters had the ability like the Black Tortoise and the Saraira, who could use their own aura to block the exploration of the Eye of God. Therefore, Lin Yuan was sure that the unexplored water area next door was a dead land. Other than the remains of some monsters, Lin Yuan did not see any life at all. Obviously, it had been abandoned for a long time. However, these sects and forces only wanted to get the treasures in the central palace and did not want to continue to explore this secret realm. After all, they had not eaten the things in front of them. How could they be in the mood to pile up a more detailed map with their lives? As soon as Lin Yuan moved, the cultivators who had been eager for a long time also began to move. In order to hunt down Lin Yuan, they now only had 4 Heavenly Dipper Realm cultivators and 21 Airborne Realm cultivators left. Compared to the hundreds of people when they first entered the secret realm, it could be said that it was very bleak. However, this also made them more determined to kill Lin Yuan here. Otherwise, once Lin Yuan left the secret realm, their losses would be more than what they had now. This was especially true for the major sects and forces. The conflict between the two sides was already on the verge of erupting. It was only because the two sides restrained their temper that they did not directly fight. This time, after falling out with each other, Lin Yuan would make a move on these sects and forces as soon as he left the secret realm. A group of 25 people quickly followed Lin Yuan's group into the new unknown water area. Most of them already had a certain understanding of the rules of this place. Different groups were divided into different territories. Unless it was time to hunt, these monsters would not take half a step out of the minefield. The noon hunting time had just passed. Even if the monster wanted to continue to help Lin Yuan, it would not step out of its own territory. Black Snake, this time you're dead. The Heavenly Dipper Realm cultivator who had been shouting at Lin Yuan before secretly clenched his fists. A gloomy look flashed in his eyes. He felt that he had been humiliated in front of Lin Yuan several times in a row. This made him, who came from a superclass sect, resentful of Lin Yuan in his heart. After all, it could be said that he was almost surrounded by thousands of people since he was a child. Even some of the young masters of the big families had to smile and talk to him submissively when they saw him. However, this Black Snake had humiliated him several times in a row, which was tantamount to giving him several loud slaps in the face. Chapter 351. After entering this desolate water area, the group of cultivators trembled in fear. After all, the scene of the monster slaughtering everyone 2 days ago was still vivid in their minds. Now that they had stepped into an unfamiliar water area again, even if everyone present had decent combat strength, they were on high alert at this moment, afraid that another monster would suddenly jump out from the side. However, after walking for 700 to 800 meters, other than the traces left by Lin Yuan and his group on the white sand, they didn't see any traces of living creatures at all. They only saw pieces of decaying beast bones from time to time, as if there had been no life here for a long time. After a moment, someone suddenly exclaimed, "Black Snake." Only then did everyone recover from their alert state, and they all cast their gazes forward. At this moment, Lin Yuan didn't have the slightest weak posture of being carried by people at all. Instead, he was coiled up and coldly sizing up a group of cultivators with strong fighting spirit. Guanshan crossed his arms in front of his chest and stood on the left side of Lin Yuan. Threads that couldn't be seen by the naked eye were floating around Guanshan, while on the right side of Lin Yuan, there was a cold expression on his face. After taking off his shirt, he revealed the iron rings that covered his arms. Thump. The 4 Heaven Dipper Realm powerhouses walking at the front were shocked at the same time, and they all looked at Lin Yuan with horror in their eyes. This Black Snake has actually recovered? Thinking back to the day when Lin Yuan instantly killed a Heaven Dipper Realm powerhouse who was on the same level as them, these 4 people's faces were filled with horror at the same time. However, soon a Heaven Dipper Realm powerhouse regained his composure and sneered, "It's only been 2 days. Even if this Black Snake can really recover from its weakened state, can it still perfectly control its own power?" It's deliberately mystifying to scare us away. Lin Yuan's eyes flashed with a hint of ridicule. In the next moment, a ferocious water dragon had condensed beside Lin Yuan. Seeing that Lin Yuan could really mobilize his own power, the 4 Heaven Dipper Realm cultivators were shocked again. The scene of Lin Yuan instantly killing a Heaven Dipper Realm cultivator was still vivid in their minds. They didn't want to be the unlucky ones. The mockery in Lin Yuan's eyes turned into a sneer as he said with a dark face, "What? This king was able to transform into a flood dragon thanks to the opportunity that you guys found for him. Now that this king has recovered to his peak state, don't you guys want to come and see how good this king is?" A Heaven Dipper Realm expert's eyes burned with fighting spirit as he growled, "Everyone, things have come to this point. Even if we are willing to take a step back, this black snake will never let us go. We can't escape death anyway. Let's fight." It was as if the surrounding water had received an order from a king. They turned into water swords and rushed towards Lin Yuan. Just this. Lin Yuan's eyes flashed with ridicule. In the next moment, the Water King launched those swords, but they collapsed before they could get close to Lin Yuan. As a water-type monster, Lin Yuan could see at a glance that the other party's method was just a feint. It condensed some water to attack the enemy in an instant. There was no need to guide and control at all. Therefore, even if there was a certain gap between the two sides, Lin Yuan could only temporarily affect the opponent's ability to control water, but Lin Yuan could make it collapse directly. The Heaven Dipper Realm expert who controlled water changed his face. He knew that Lin Yuan was a water-type monster, but he didn't expect Lin Yuan's ability to control water to be so strong that his probing attack instantly turned into nothingness. If it was just this, he didn't intend to rely on these methods to test the opponent's strength. However, the moment Lin Yuan made his move, he suddenly felt that the surrounding water spirit power was directly disconnected from him. What kind of absurd thing is this? He, a Heaven Dipper Realm water cultivator, actually lost the ability to control water under the water. This black snake is different. The Heaven Dipper Realm expert who controlled water just opened his mouth. Another Heaven Dipper Realm expert narrowed his eyes slightly and said in a deep voice, "It seems that our Black Water Dragon King has awakened an incredible ability after transforming into a flood dragon. But it doesn't matter, its ability can't be effective forever. You step aside for the time being, I will deal with this black snake." As his voice fell, the Heaven Dipper Realm expert's body crackled and thunder surged continuously. His whole person looked like he was wearing a purple battle suit. Thunder-type cultivator? The expression on Xuanhuan's face changed slightly. There were many schools of thought among cultivators. Among them, the 5 elements were the most common. In a place like the Northern Territory, cultivators of the water, wood, and earth elements were more common. After all, the cultivation speed of cultivators in different environments would also be different. But aside from the common 5 elements, there were also some rare special elements. For example, the lightning element was known as the element with the most powerful and violent attacks among the special elements. There was a rumor in the northern frontier that the first-rate sect, the Flying Sun Pavilion, had a thunder technique that was passed down from ancient times. Those who weren't talented couldn't cultivate it. But rumors were just rumors. Although the Flying Sun Pavilion didn't refute the rumor, they understood the principle of a tall tree attracting the wind. So, the Flying Sun Pavilion had never revealed any traces of thunder technique. It was only until now that the Heaven Dipper Realm expert from the Flying Sun Pavilion revealed his thunder technique. In the blink of an eye, the Heaven Dipper Realm expert from the Flying Sun Pavilion had already rushed over. His fists were wrapped in lightning as he went straight for Lin Yuan's face. The surging electric current hit his face and even Lin Yuan felt suffocated. Tut. Another Heaven Dipper Realm cultivator growled. A milky white sound wave actually appeared and went straight for Lin Yuan's back. In the blink of an eye, Lin Yuan fell into a situation where he was attacked from the front and back after defeating the Heaven Dipper Realm expert who could control water. Guanshan and Xuanhuan's expressions changed slightly. They moved almost at the same time, wanting to block one side for Lin Yuan. However, the airborne realm cultivators around them also moved quickly and surrounded the two. The Heaven Dipper Realm expert who could control water was right. Things had already come to this point. Even if they were willing to let Lin Yuan go now, once Lin Yuan left this secret realm, he wouldn't let them and the forces behind them go. Therefore, from the moment they decided to stand in a team, only one side could survive between them and Lin Yuan. Therefore, there was no reason for them to retreat now that they had started fighting. Even if they didn't have the guts to fight Lin Yuan, they wouldn't let Guanshan and Xuanhuan interfere in the matter of 4 Heaven Dipper Realm experts surrounding Lin Yuan. Keep moving forward if you don't want to die. Guanshan's eyes were red. He didn't hold back at all with the scimitar in his hand, which was his trump card. He directly plunged it into the crowd and instantly killed 8 late-stage airborne realm cultivators. Chapter 352. Seeing how Guanshan looked like a madman, the airborne realm cultivators who rushed up looked at each other. For a moment, they were actually intimidated by Guanshan's aura. However, they did not directly rush up. These airborne realm cultivators still surrounded Guanshan and Shui Yan. They knew very well that while Guanshan's scimitar was terrifying, he was only able to use it twice when he was at his peak. After that, Guanshan's aura would become unstable. Even if he still had the strength to fight with them, he would not be able to kill them all in an instant. Kill? Guanshan's attack did not scare off those airborne realm cultivators, but Shui Yan quickly growled and took the initiative to rush forward. Both of his hands abruptly lashed out at the same time. It took only an instant for 6 airborne realm cultivators to be sent flying by Shui Yan's terrifying strength. 2 of them were even crushed into meat paste on the spot. Both of them did not hold back at all. They even used their trump cards as soon as they came up. Even if they were to face a group of cultivators who were half a step into the Heavenly Dipper realm, they were confident that they could kill or severely injure the other party. Shui Yan, you are also a member of a clan in the northern frontier. Do you think that this black snake is now attacking our sects and forces, and when it defeats us later, you people of the clans and families will end up well? Yes, this black snake is very ambitious. Although it is treating the clans well now, the black snake obviously wants it to be the only voice in the northern frontier. When our sects and forces are suppressed, you people of the clans and families will definitely not be able to get any benefits. Lord Shui, you are a member of the northern frontier, so I hope that you will stand on our side. When this black snake was not around, everyone was doing well. Although I do not deny that the appearance of the black snake has indeed made the northern frontier prosperous, don't be fooled by appearances. The black snake is just trying to divide us and defeat the sects and clans one by one. Voices of persuasion were heard. While those airborne realm cultivators were no match for Shui Yan and Guanshan, they had nowhere else to run. If Guanshan, who was suspected to be the Xuanhuan barbarian, was the only one present, they would have been able to hold their own for a bit. However, as soon as Shui Yan, who was the successor of the Ma army, got involved in the battle, the scales of victory would have tipped right away. Even if all of them were to die, they would have only been able to delay those 2 for a bit. No one wanted to die. If they wanted to die, they wouldn't have participated in this incident. At first, they only thought that exploring the secret territory was a good opportunity to improve themselves. However, no one thought that this matter was set up by some people from the beginning to the end. They also didn't expect that the battle between Lin Yuan and the sects would directly break out in the secret territory. They didn't even have the chance to choose. They were forced to stand on the side of the sects and become enemies with Lin Yuan. Now it was too late to regret. Master Shui, I've heard a lot about you. I've long wanted to meet you, a piece of trash. The Heavenly Dipper realm powerhouse who could control water entered with a strong force. His eyes fell on Shui Yan's face without restraint. He sneered and said, as a level 4 Heavenly Dipper realm cultivator, you can't even support a small family. So, it shouldn't be a problem for me to call you trash, right? Shui Yan glanced coldly at the Heavenly Dipper realm powerhouse who could control water and said expressionlessly, Li Chang, I still remember the scene when you knelt at the door of my Shui family and begged me to give you a meal. You're just a villain who got what he wanted. Li Chang snorted coldly and stepped forward. He pulled out the sword at his waist with a backhand. The cold blade was raised and directly slashed at Shui Yan's face. Shui Yan didn't dodge. He directly raised his arms to affect the other party. For a moment, the shadows of the sword and the fist almost shrouded the 2 figures. It was almost impossible to tell who was leading the attack. Ha! Guanshan gently exhaled. When his eyes fell on the other Heavenly Dipper realm powerhouse who didn't participate in the siege of Lin Yuan, he put his right hand on his chest and made a strange bow. He said in a deep voice, Senior Su Guanshan, the Jinx, pays his respects. Well said, well said. Senior Su was an old man who was missing his front teeth. His skin looked drier and more wrinkled than the bark of a tree. There was no sword hanging at his waist, but a golden pipe. If he wasn't famous in the northern frontier and was once known as a poison master, ordinary people would only think of him as an old farmer who was obsessed with mulberry fields. Similarly, very few people knew that Senior Su and Guanshan came from the same sect. That organization, which was similar to the embroidered uniform guard, would cultivate a group of terrifying assassins almost every 10 years. For example, Xuanhuan's sect was good at hidden weapons and controlling objects. Another sect that was equally famous specialized in the art of poison. They could take a person's life from thousands of miles away in a day. Senior Su took the pipe from his waist and gently took a puff. With an intoxicated expression he said, "It's not easy to master the 1,000 silk twists. In my generation, there were only 5 people who were able to master the 1,000 silk twists. For you to be able to master the 1,000 silk twists, you don't lack talent or fortune. It would be a pity if you died here." At this point, Senior Su paused. He squinted his eyes and smiled. "Seeing that we are from the same sect, if you surrender now and help us deal with this black snake, I can spare your life. How about it?" Xuanhuan didn't say anything. He just frowned with a thoughtful look in his eyes. Although they were from the same sect, he knew nothing about the poison cultivator's methods. He didn't even know what methods the poison cultivator would use to attack him. He was even worried that the poison cultivator had already poisoned him in the time it took for him to speak. What a pity, what a pity. Senior Su put down the pipe in his hand and shook his head gently. A look of regret flashed across his face. However, after feeling regretful, Senior Su suddenly opened his mouth. A mouthful of thick purple smoke came out of his mouth and instantly spread in the direction where Xuanhuan was. Along the way, 2 airborne realm cultivators couldn't dodge in time and immediately knelt on the ground with their hands on their throats. In just 2 breaths they died on the spot. There was a big difference between the half-step Celestial Star Border Realm and the Celestial Star Border Realm. Moreover, the few Celestial Star Border Realm cultivators who were making a move here were not the top of the Celestial Star Border Realm. Once they went all out, the so-called half-step Celestial Star Border Realm cultivators were no match for them. Xuanhuan's eyes twitched. He tapped on the ground with the tip of his foot and suddenly retreated. He didn't want to see if that cloud of poisonous smoke could kill him like how it killed those airborne realm cultivators. Senior Su was still smoking his pipe from time to time. It was as if he was not worried about Xuanhuan being able to dodge his attack at all. He looked like he was just watching a show. Chapter 353. Black Snake, none of your helpers will be able to come. Lei Xiao said mockingly as he waved his fist at Lin Yuan. Lin Yuan wasn't in a hurry to fight back. He just kept dodging under the opponent's stormy attacks. When he couldn't dodge anymore, he would control the water dragon behind him to block. It was as if he was firmly suppressed by the opponent's attacks. Even fighting back became a problem. Lei Xiao waved his fist and sneered, "I knew it. Black Snake, you haven't left the weak state at all. You're just pretending now. Do you think we can suffer the same loss twice? This time if you—" Before Lei Xiao finished his words, he lowered his head in disbelief and stared blankly at the dragon tail that pierced through his chest. "Let me teach you a lesson. You can use it in your next life." Lin Yuan, who succeeded in one hit, sneered and said in a deep voice, "In your next life, when your opponent keeps dodging your attacks, you have to be careful. Because the opponent may not be suppressed by you to the point that he can't fight back. Instead, he's constantly adapting to your attack rhythm. Once the time is right, your opponent will quickly reveal his fangs and finish you off." Lei Xiao wasn't a cultivator of the thwart cultivation method. He just relied on his speed and the protection of the thunder armor, so he was arrogant enough to fight Lin Yuan in close combat. However, with Lin Yuan's current attack power, he really didn't care about the defensive power of the thunder armor. It was just that if he attacked rashly, he would be blocked by Lei Xiao. Now that he was attacked from the front and back, Lin Yuan didn't have the intention to fight slowly with Lei Xiao. Instead, he had been looking for an opportunity to kill him in one blow. Just now, under the continuous attacks, Lei Xiao quietly took a breath, causing the storm-like attacks to be interrupted. This allowed Lin Yuan to seize the fleeting opportunity to directly erase his existence. At this time, the sound waves from the Heaven Dipper Realm expert had already arrived behind Lin Yuan. Seeing the sudden death of the Thunder Cultivator, the Heaven Dipper Realm powerhouse did not have much emotion on his face, as if everything was within his expectations. Seeing that Lin Yuan still did not dodge, there was even a sneer on his face. It seemed that Lin Yuan's behavior, in his opinion, was simply courting death. However, Lin Yuan didn't think so. First of all, Lin Yuan's defense was as high as 600 points. Coupled with the 65% damage reduction from the max-level Golden Body secret art, it was almost enough to make him immune to most of the damage. At the very least, damage that was enough to kill a Mountain Lord realm monster in the eyes of others would only cause light or serious injuries to Lin Yuan at most. Of course, if Lin Yuan were to take on a terrifying killing move like the Fire Kirin's Doomsday Meteor, he would still die on the spot. After all, that kind of damage had already exceeded the limit of what Lin Yuan could withstand. However, How could a mere Heaven Dipper Realm Level 3 cultivator compare to the means used by a desolate demon realm expert? The milky white sound waves landed heavily on Lin Yuan's body. Lin Yuan staggered from the impact, and some of the scales on his body instantly shattered. However, this degree of injury was nothing to Lin Yuan. After experiencing the pain of his physical body transforming into a flood dragon, this sound wave wasn't even qualified to make Lin Yuan feel pain. That's it. Lin Yuan turned around and tilted his head at the Heaven Dipper Realm expert who roared out the sound wave. A hint of mockery flashed in his heterochromatic eyes. This Heaven Dipper Realm expert clearly didn't expect Lin Yuan to not die on the spot after taking on his strongest move head-on. If that was all, it wouldn't be a big deal. After all, Lin Yuan was now a terrifying existence that could instantly kill a Heaven Dipper Realm Level 2 cultivator. Putting aside his attack power, his ridiculous defense power was nothing much. However, now that this scene appeared before his eyes, this Heaven Dipper Realm expert only wanted to curse. How was this F*King ridiculous? This was F*King fantasy. His strongest move landed squarely on Lin Yuan's body, but Lin Yuan didn't seem to feel it at all. It was as if his full-strength punch had directly hit cotton. Subconsciously, this Heaven Dipper Realm cultivator wanted to escape. Although he was a disciple of a sect, the sect behind him was different. The sect behind him had a Void Realm expert. If Black Snake wanted to touch the sect behind him, he would have to consider whether he had the ability to do so. However, the moment this Heaven Dipper Realm expert turned around, he suddenly saw a clear and transparent water dragon looking down at him. Although that ferocious face was made of water, it still brought a deep sense of fear to this Heaven Dipper Realm expert. Black Snake, my master is Master Qingming. He's one of the few Void Realm experts in the northern frontier. If you kill me, my master will never let you go. Most people would panic when they encountered danger, but there were also some people who would become calmer and even think of solutions that they couldn't normally think of. This Heaven Dipper Realm expert was clearly this kind of person. He was very clear that his relationship with Black Snake had reached a point where only one of them would die. As the person who took the lead in scheming against Black Snake, even if Black Snake let everyone go, it wouldn't let him go. Therefore, he knew that begging for mercy wouldn't have any effect. Master Qingming? Lin Yuan's heterochromatic eyes flashed with a hint of coldness. Although he didn't make any movements, the image of the angry dragon that could instantly kill the powerhouse of the Kongming realm stopped in an instant. It just maintained the posture of staring at the powerhouse of the Heavenly Dipper realm. Black Snake, although I don't want to admit it, you are a powerful person. Therefore you should know that there are no eternal enemies in this world, only eternal benefits. I can join hands with these people to harm you for the spiritual item in the central palace. Then I can become your staunch ally for other benefits. This matter is my fault and I admit it. As long as you state a price, I will definitely not frown. Perhaps we will have a chance to cooperate in the future. Seeing that Lin Yuan was really intimidated by Master Qingming's name, the Heaven Dipper Realm expert immediately added with a smile. His expression gradually relaxed. Lin Yuan was secretly thinking, although the existence of the Kongming realm and the desolate demon realm are above, according to the unspoken rules of the Qianhu continent, they are not allowed to intervene in the war without the strength of the same level. On Lin Yuan's side, whether it is the Northern Region Lord's Mansion or the Black Water Dragon Palace, there is no existence that can compete with the Kongming realm, so he can use this rule to protect himself. However, there was always a limit to everything. In the face of life and death, these people didn't care about rules. Chapter 354. Speaking of which, this unspoken rule was applicable during peacetime. Now that the Xuanhu dynasty was so chaotic and the northern frontier had fallen into Lin Yuan's hands, who knew how many people were eyeing Lin Yuan's terrifying benefits? If Lin Yuan forced these cultivators into a corner, he would definitely not have a good ending. It was even possible that he would be directly killed by a Void Realm cultivator. For these sects with Kongming realm in charge, Lin Yuan's initial intention was not to uproot them, but to expel this level of sects from the northern region. He was not arrogant enough to think that he was invincible, so after the Heavenly Dipper Realm powerhouse mentioned his master, Lin Yuan seemed a little hesitant. There were ways to expel them. For the current Lin Yuan, the best way to expel these sects with Void Realm cultivators was to deal with them coldly. After all, the matter of weakening the sects and clans had already been decided. These benefits snatched from the mouths of these clans and sects would ultimately become the benefits of the Northern Frontier Academy. When these sects and clans felt that they had no benefits in the northern frontier and would grow weaker day by day, even unable to recruit disciples, they would naturally move to other places to take root. It's just a fake Taoist. Can his name be used to scare people? In the distance, a middle-aged man in silver armor strode over. His majestic gait and the bloody aura radiating from his body immediately caused Lin Yuan's pupils to contract. Shock appeared in his eyes. "Insulting my master, I think you're courting death." The Heaven Dipper realm powerhouse had just used his master to suppress Lin Yuan, and now was the time when he was at his most inflated. He just heard the voice behind him and did not look back to see who was talking behind him. He directly opened his mouth and roared. But soon he saw traces of ridicule in Lin Yuan's heterochromatic eyes. It seemed that his words were not appropriate, but he could not think of any problem with his words. After all, Master Qing Ming was one of the few Void Realm cultivators on the northern frontier. Even Hu Yen and the others in the past had to respectfully greet his master when they saw him. The person who spoke. Thinking of this, the strong man of Heavengang Realm slowly turned around and saw the figure in silver armor. His pupils shrank to the size of a needle and he exclaimed, "Yen! Yen!" There weren't many Kongming Realm cultivators in the northern frontier, but strictly speaking there were still a few of them. Among them, the guardian of the northern frontier, Yen Xingqi was the strongest, followed by Freedom Courtyard's Master Xuan. Then there were Master Qing Ming, Old Demon Blood Sea, and Fairy Qin Sei. These three experts each oversaw a region. Below them were some Tom, Dick, and Harry. They were a bunch of old farts who were stuck at the peak of the Heaven Dipper realm. They relied on their low cultivation to compete with those weaker than them. Any sect that didn't have a Kongming realm cultivator would be bullied by these old farts. However, when they saw the existence of these 5 Heaven Dipper realm cultivators, they all behaved like obedient dogs. He was now admiring his own courage. After all, in the entire northern frontier, the number of people who dared to say that Yen Xingqi was courting death could be counted with one's fingers. Even if his master was here personally, he might not have the guts to shout at Yen Xingqi. Right now, he felt like his head was buzzing and his mind was completely blank. Yen Xingqi strode in front of He Shi and directly passed by this Heaven Realm cultivator. He crossed his arms and looked at He Shi with a scrutinizing gaze. He said in a deep voice, "He Shi, I'm very curious. What are you trying to do by making such a big commotion in the northern region?" After being questioned by Yen Xingqi, Lin Yuan was stunned. He had thought that Yen Xingqi could be the reinforcements that Lei Fan had invited. He had also thought that Yen Xingqi was planning to take advantage of this opportunity to kill him, the demonic beast that was causing trouble in the northern frontier, and use this opportunity to liberate the northern frontier and bring the northern frontier back under the control of mankind. However, he had never thought that Yen Xingqi would actually ask him about his plans for the future with such a serious face. These aristocratic families and sects in the northern frontier are like leeches that cling onto the northern frontier. Every year they siphon off huge amounts of benefits from the northern frontier. Every time they consume resources, it is the blood and sweat of countless citizens of the northern frontier. I don't care about the past, but now that the northern frontier is under my rule, it is impossible for them to continue doing such things. Furthermore, these aristocratic families and sects have exploited the citizens of the northern frontier for so many years. Now that I am making them bleed, and it is also beneficial to the northern frontier, this isn't too much, right? Lin Yuan raised his eyelids and said in a low voice. Yen Xingqi pondered for a moment, then laughed lightly and said, "What if they are not willing?" Although Yen Xingqi was the guardian of the northern frontier, he did not have a wife or children, and did not have any family ties. Therefore he was not within Lin Yuan's scope of attack. However, he was very interested in Lin Yuan's way of thinking. After all, even a powerful sovereign king like Lei Qiusheng would not dare to offend the aristocratic families and sections. Since ancient times, there had been many sovereigns who had died in strange ways, almost all because they had interfered with the interests of the aristocratic families and sects. Since ancient times, it had always been the aristocratic families and sects that stepped on the heads of the citizens, sucking the blood of the citizens, and forcing the citizens to worship them as gods. They would be proud if their children could become disciples of the sects or become members of the aristocratic families. While they were envious of the aristocratic families and sects for having such rich resources, they never seemed to realize that such a huge amount of wealth had actually flowed out from their hands. Of course, they could not be biased. The existence of the aristocratic families and sects was not completely a disadvantage. When faced with evil forces like the demonic beasts and heretic cultivators, there were many places where the local government could not take care of everything. Basically, it was the local aristocratic families and sects that protected the citizens. Therefore, there was no need to fight against the smaller aristocratic families and sections. However, if it was the larger aristocratic families and sects, it would be a headache for the 7 dynasties, as it was hard to say if they could win or not. However, in the northern frontier, Lin Yuan did not need to worry about this problem. Firstly, there were the demonic beasts in the Xuanhuan mountain range. Although they did not have a good relationship with Lin Yuan, they would receive a large amount of spiritual items from Lin Yuan every month as dividends. It was not a problem for them to restrain their subordinates and not disturb the citizens. In addition, the plans for the northern frontier's census and identity verification were already on the right track. Apart from the spies that the major forces had scattered in the northern frontier, Lin Yuan could guarantee that in the future, even the secret agents of the Seven Dynasties would not be able to move freely in the northern frontier, let alone heretic cultivators. In such an environment, the benefits of the aristocratic families and sects were next to nothing. They would even drag down the northern frontier academy that Lin Yuan had established. It was even to the extent that both sides wanted to strangle each other to ensure that their interests would not be shaken. This was the real reason why both sides had shed all pretense of cordiality. Chapter 355. I will definitely eradicate the forces of the sections. With the existence of the academy, the people of the northern region will no longer need to pay such a huge price to cultivate. After taking away the students, the major sects will definitely be short of manpower. Therefore, before we have a falling out, I have to directly destroy the sects of the northern region. Otherwise, they might not dare to take revenge on me. However, it will be too easy for me to make a move on the instructors and students of the academy to intimidate the commoners who want to enter the academy. As for the aristocratic families, I will set new rules for them. Of course, while depriving them of some privileges, I will ensure that they can earn enough to support their families. However, after I take over the northern frontier, I do not wish for the orders of the northern frontier prince's mansion to remain unissued. I also do not wish for there to be any dissenting voices in the northern frontier. If there is a problem with my way of thinking, we can discuss and solve it. I have no objections. However, if there is a voice that exists purely to oppose me or to obtain privileges for some people, I only have one attitude: kill. Lin Yuan narrowed his eyes and said slowly, Xianxia, no matter what you think, what I want to say is that a new era has begun in the northern frontier. Even if I fail, there will be a day when someone will succeed me. Anyone who opposes the era will only end up being crushed by the current of the era. When Xianxia first appeared here, Lin Yuan did not know what Xianxia wanted to do. However, when Xianxia saw him, the first thing he asked was what he wanted to do. With such a straightforward way of speaking, if Lin Yuan could not guess what Xianxia was thinking, then he deserved to die here today. Even though Lin Yuan spoke with an indifferent attitude, his heart was filled with eagerness. After all, having a void nether realm expert in the northern frontier was completely different from having a group of desolate demon realm monsters supporting Lin Yuan in the Xuanhuan mountains. If Lin Yuan suddenly died in the northern frontier, the demonic beasts of the Xuanhuan mountain range would at most organize a beast tide to take revenge on these humans. However, if both sides really went to war, even if the other 6 dynasties were willing to see the Xuanhu dynasty fall, they would not be willing to see the Xuanhu dynasty's territory be occupied by the demonic beasts. At that time, the 7 dynasties might even join forces to attack the Xuanhuan mountain range. Therefore, although the demonic beast's strength seemed powerful, they were indeed unreliable. But if Lin Yuan had a void realm cultivator behind him, that would be a different story. Especially when the one supporting Lin Yuan was Xianxia, the publicly acknowledged strongest cultivator in the northern frontier. If Xianxia wanted to take revenge on a certain faction, that faction might not be able to withstand it. Xianxia stroked his chin and smiled. Interesting. I'm suddenly interested in the new era that you mentioned. How about it, Black Water Dragon King? Do you want to bring me to see what the new era looks like? When Xianxia's voice fell, the faces of most of the people present turned gloomy. Today, Lin Yuan had used his actions to prove that he could kill a Heaven Star Border Realm Level 4 cultivator like killing a dog. If he joined forces with Xianxia, the sects in the northern frontier would definitely be wiped out and expelled if they did not quickly unite. Most importantly, they did not even know if they could make it out of the secret realm alive. It was impossible for them to spread this important news to their respective sections. Shui Yan's face was gloomy at first, but he quickly adjusted his state of mind. This was because Lin Yuan said that he would set new rules for the aristocratic families instead of uprooting the aristocratic families. He would also ensure that the aristocratic families would gain enough benefits from the new rules. In addition, Lin Yuan's promise to him was like a tranquilizer. Invisibly, a murderous aura spread out in the air. Other than Shui Yan and Qin Guanshan, everyone present had a look of despair. At the same time, Lei Qiuxing, who was standing by the shore, squinted his eyes and said in a deep voice, "It's about time. The 1st and 2nd battalions will stay behind to keep watch. Once there are any cultivators coming out of the secret realm or approaching from other areas, take them down immediately. The rest of you follow me." Luo Su, who was wrapped in bandages, was slightly taken aback. His eyes revealed a look of confusion as he asked, "Isn't it too early to make a move on the sects? Are you so sure that the Black Snake will reach an agreement with Xianxia? Aren't you afraid that Xianxia will kill the Black Snake and help the sects in the northern frontier to wipe us out? If the Black Snake can't even deal with Xianxia, the Demon Emperor Association would have changed hands long ago." Lei Fan's lips curled up as he laughed coldly and continued, "Furthermore, attack us? Xianxia has stayed in the northern frontier for so many years and he can't bear to see the northern frontier in a bad state. Our existence has brought changes to the northern frontier and that is why Xianxia has appeared here. Don't be fooled by his cold face. In his heart, he hopes that we will continue to exist and carry out the orders in his hands." Speaking up to this point, Lei Fan paused for a moment and the smile on his face deepened. "Besides, what right does he have to wipe us out? The northern frontier has more than 600,000 guards. Others may not know what we are doing, but do you think they don't know? Even if it's not for the northern frontier, for themselves, they will stand firmly on our side. No matter how strong Xianxia is, can he kill 600,000 people? But the sects?" Luo Su opened his mouth again, a look of worry flashing past his eyes. As someone who had spent most of his life in the northern frontier, he was very clear about the morals and power of the sects in the northern frontier. So on the matter of falling out with the sects in the northern frontier, Luo Su had always maintained a conservative attitude. The past is the past and the present is the present. In the past, if we were to collapse, the Xuanhu dynasty would immediately send a new team to take over the northern frontier. But after seeing the huge profits of the northern frontier, everyone in the Xuanhu dynasty, including that man, wants to take over the northern frontier. Coupled with the tense situation in various places, the Xuanhu dynasty is unable to gather enough people. If the Xuanhu dynasty is unable to gather enough people, the sects and families in the northern frontier will have their own ideas. By then, the northern frontier will turn from the prosperous scene it is today into a state of seclusion and war between the various powers. Do you think the Xuanhu dynasty is willing to see such a scene? Is Xianxia willing to see such a scene? Don't tell me what happened to Ma Jun that year will happen again? The smile on Lei Fan's face grew wider and wider, to the point that his smile was somewhat sinister as he said coldly, "Once I fall, the northern frontier will immediately descend into chaos. Even if Xianxia has taken care of the Black Snake, he will still stand on our side. If we follow the Black Snake's plan, we will be the winners." Chapter 356. After receiving the order from the lake in the mystic realm, Hu Yen and the others changed into their armors and began to mobilize the various forces scattered around the northern frontier, such as the Guardian Corps and the Council of the Demon Emperor. After defeating xuanhuan last time, the guards of the northern region had not been used for a long time. First, it was because Lin Yuan had brought a strong economic support to the northern region. Almost everyone intended to take advantage of this opportunity to make a good profit. Not many people intended to cause trouble at this time. Second, it was because the structure of the northern region seemed to be stable, but in fact, the secret agents of the sects, aristocratic families, and even the major dynasties were lurking in the northern region, waiting for Lin Yuan to make a mistake. Therefore, all parties were secretly wrestling, but no one would put the struggle on the surface. Today, this legendary army that defeated 5 times their number with 600,000 people once again showed its fangs. In just 4 hours, a third of the hundreds of sects in the northern frontier had been wiped out. At first, the Northern Frontier Guardian Corps still used the excuse of assisting in the investigation. However, after encountering the sect's disciples several times, the officers at the bottom were no longer willing to bet the lives of their subordinates on whether the other party would surrender or not. All the sects and forces that were listed on the elimination list were directly killed without even a chance to talk. At first, there were still some sects and forces that were strong enough that even the Northern Frontier Guardian Corps could not do anything to them. However, their resistance was useless. If they were targeted by a certain dynasty or a stronger force, perhaps they would have gritted their teeth and let this tough bone go. However, this was the Northern Frontier, and their enemy was the Beast King who controlled the Northern Frontier and was even conferred as a god by the Xuanhu dynasty. Those sects and forces that defeated the Northern Frontier Guardian Corps did not even have time to catch their breath before they heard a series of thunderous footsteps. Those were the footsteps of a beast tide that could shake the earth and mountains when the number of beasts reached a certain scale. The sects and forces that hadn't been attacked by the Northern Frontier Guard Corps were also on tenterhooks. Most of them didn't even know what was going on. They were all trembling and began to send the old, weak women and children to the escape routes that they had prepared in advance. If Lin Yuan was in charge of this operation, Lin Yuan would have just raised his hand and let these old, weak women and children go. As for nurturing a tiger and inviting calamity, he couldn't wait for a strong enemy to come and give him attribute points. Even if the enemy was a genius, they would have to obediently kneel down and submit to him. In terms of growth speed alone, Lin Yuan didn't believe that there was a creature in this world that could be faster than him. If there was, then it should also be a cheat-like existence. However, the one who was in charge of the cleanup operation this time was not Lin Yuan, but the one who had been lying low in the Northern Frontier Duke's palace all this while. Other than having the title of Duke of the Northern Frontier, Lei Fan, whose real power was not even comparable to the other 6 city lords. Once a venomous snake coiled its body and launched an attack, even a hunter who had dealt with venomous snakes all year round would be caught off guard and bitten fiercely. The petty tricks of those sects did not escape the eyes of the Association of Demon Emperors at all. Therefore, before they reached a safe place, they were intercepted and killed by a group of cultivators in black capes and devil masks. Not to mention the young disciples who were regarded as the seeds of revival by the sects in the future. Even the real old, weak women and children could not win the slightest sympathy in front of the criminals and demi-humans of the Association of Demon Emperors. They were all killed without any hesitation. After the corpses were beheaded, they directly piled up in front of their respective sects' mountain gates, as if to announce that those who went against Lin Yuan would end up in such a miserable state. At the same time, in the Flying Sun Pavilion, a first-rate sect in the northern frontier. Preposterous, preposterous. Sect Master Miao Chun paced back and forth in the meeting hall. The expression on his face was so gloomy that it was almost dripping water. After the mystic realm opened, various powers had sent people into the mystic realm. Even the famous Black Snake couldn't resist the temptation of the mystic realm. As one of the first-rate sects who had been secretly controlling the mystic realm for many years, the Flying Sun Pavilion had even sent a candidate for the next sect master, hoping to take advantage of this opportunity to kill Lin Yuan. The other sects were the same. After all, the mystic realm was a place that couldn't be connected to the outside world and was extremely dangerous to those who didn't know the situation in the mystic realm. Even if a similar place appeared, there might not be enough water-type spirit items to attract the Black Snake. This was the best opportunity to get rid of the Black Snake. Once the Black Snake died, they would throw the blame to the mystic realm's demonic beasts, and the northern frontier's Wang residents could only swallow their anger. Without the Black Snake's protection, the northern frontier's Wang residence was nothing in the eyes of the other sects. But what Miao Chun didn't expect was that before he received any news, Lei Fan's side had already dared to send out troops to wipe out the various sections. This action seemed to be shedding all pretense of cordiality, but at the same time, it was also sending out a signal. In fact, there wasn't anything good in the mystic realm. The real spirit items were all in the palace in the middle of the mystic realm. Those who didn't have the blood of the dragon race wouldn't be able to enter the palace. Therefore, other than those rogue cultivators, rather than saying that the other sects had entered the mystic realm to search for treasures, it was more accurate to say that each of them had their own ulterior motives. They all wanted to reap some benefits from the battle between Lin Yuan and the other sections. But with Lei Fan's actions, it was needless to say who would emerge victorious in the mystic realm. With regards to the actions of the northern frontier's Wang residents, the Flying Sun Pavilion wasn't worried at all. Although the northern frontier's guard army was fierce, they were only targeting the third-rate and second-rate sections. Even the higher-level sects in the second-rate sects weren't something that the northern frontier's Wang residents could touch, let alone a first-rate sect like the Flying Sun Pavilion. The only thing that made Miao Chun's heart ache was that the Lei Xiao who was sent into the mystic realm was already the most outstanding disciple that the Flying Sun Pavilion had recruited in the past 30 years. Furthermore, he had grown up in the Flying Sun Pavilion. His parents were just commoners and he didn't have any powerful backing behind him. It could be said that he was the best candidate to inherit the Flying Sun Pavilion. And yet, he had died in the mystic realm just like that. Black Snake, you and I cannot live under the same sky. Miao Chun fiercely pushed out his palm, and the strong wind instantly turned the furniture and antiques into dust. Only then did he walk out of his courtyard with his hands behind his back with a ferocious look on his face. Facing the group of consecrators and elders who were already waiting outside, he said, "Although there are many sects in the northern frontier who don't usually get along well with each other, we have always been united when fighting against external enemies. This time, when the smaller sects are in trouble, it will not look good for us, the bigger sections. All of you will lead your men to assist those smaller sects and bring them under the jurisdiction of the Flying Sun Pavilion for protection. What if the people from the northern frontier's Wang residents stop us? One of the consecrators cupped his hands and asked. Chapter 357. Kill? I'd like to see if this black snake has the guts to come and settle the score with me. Miao Chun narrowed his eyes without any hesitation. He didn't care about the northern frontier prince's mansion at all. In Miao Chun's opinion, as long as he left the black snake, the prince's mansion at the northern frontier prince's mansion would be a paper tiger that couldn't even withstand a single blow. They wouldn't even be as powerful as a second-rate sect. Although they weren't on the brink of destruction, they weren't much of a threat. There's no need for the demon emperor to personally settle the score with you. A calm voice suddenly rang out from the crowd outside the Bian mansion. Miao Chun instinctively frowned and looked in the direction of the voice. Immediately, he saw a bearded old man in a tattered white robe leaning on a sword. He held a vermilion gourd in his hand and poured wine into his mouth from time to time. Peak of the Heaven Star Border Realm. Miao Chun narrowed his eyes slightly and looked past the old man's appearance to see the most dangerous side of him. He didn't know how this person managed to sneak into the group of consecrators and elders of the Flying Sun Pavilion, but in terms of cultivation he wasn't any weaker than him. In addition, he was surrounded by a group of Heaven Star Border Realm experts, yet he was still able to maintain his composure. He was probably an existence that had walked very far on the path of the Heaven Star Border Realm. Although he wasn't able to knock open the gate of heaven and enter the Kongming realm, he was probably much stronger than ordinary Heaven Star Border Realm cultivators. You are? Miao Chun guessed that the other party was at least an expert of the same level as him. Naturally, he didn't have the arrogance of someone who controlled a first-rate sect. Even his gloomy face looked much better. Demon Emperor's Association, Wine Sword Mystery. The old man drank the last mouthful of wine in the gourd and narrowed his eyes. He stood up from his original position and walked towards Miao Chun. He even said slowly, under the orders of the Demon Emperor Council, I am here to take Miao Chun's head. From today onwards, the Flying Sun Pavilion will no longer exist in the northern frontier. Although the king residences in the northern frontier couldn't touch the sects and factions, it didn't mean that the Association of the Demon Emperor couldn't do the same. Although the Association of the Demon Emperor was a force of the pugilistic world, no one could deny the growing influence of the Association of the Demon Emperor in the Sky Martial continent. Lei Fan had spent almost all of the savings that he had accumulated over this period of time to get the person in charge of the Association of the Demon Emperor, Sherdong, to agree to help him wipe out a first-rate sect in the northern frontier. However, a promise was just a promise. The Assembly of the Demon Emperor was naturally not an impulsive and short-sighted existence. Since they were going to wipe out a first-rate sect, they had to be selective. They had to find a sect with more profits to make their move. If it was about the same, they would pick a soft persimmon to pinch. Although they had the same boss, the Northern Frontier Wang residents and the Assembly of the Demon Emperor were two different factions. Things like working together was just wishful thinking. Even Lin Yuan had to pay a price for using the Assembly of the Demon Emperor, what more an outsider like Lei Fan. Hence, after much deliberation, the Assembly of the Demon Emperor finally set their sights on the Flying Sun Pavilion. After all, although the Flying Sun Pavilion was a first-rate sect in the northern frontier, their foundation was still lacking compared to the other first-rate sections. Furthermore, it was rumored that the Flying Sun Pavilion had a rare lightning-attributed martial art. The Assembly of the Demon Emperor had no reason to let go of this soft persimmon that could be a fat sheep. Umph. Hearing that, Miao Chun broke out in cold sweat and said with a gloomy face, You sure have big words. Although my cultivation isn't ranked high in the northern frontier, I'm not someone that can be trifled with. Icho. Tai Shi. Two voices rang out consecutively. A sharp sword chi exploded from the wine sword Shen's body. A snow-white long sword and a dark purple long sword flew over from afar like meteors. One on the left and one on the right. In an instant they pierced into Miao Chun's left and right shoulders. Even for someone as strong as Miao Chun, he was sent flying by the two swords and crashed heavily into his own courtyard. Miao Chun was caught off guard and lost both of his arms in the blink of an eye. Although it wasn't incurable, he definitely wouldn't be able to use both of his arms in this battle. However, this didn't make Miao Chun lose his fighting spirit. As the person in charge of a first-rate sect, if he were to cower in the matter of the sect's survival just because he was injured, how would he be able to walk in the pugilistic world in the future? Putao. Sang Luo. The wine sword Shen opened his mouth again. A red long sword and a green long sword pierced through the air. Just as Miao Chun leaped out from the ruins of his courtyard, They once again pierced into Miao Chun's legs accurately. In a face-to-face encounter, his limbs were crippled. A group of consecrators and elders of the Feiyang Pavilion looked at each other with horror in their eyes. They began to think about the origin of the wine-sword Xian. He was obviously in the same realm as the Pavilion Master. Why didn't the Pavilion Master even have the ability to resist in front of him? The wine-sword Xian saw that the atmosphere suddenly stagnated. He smiled freely and said indifferently, "Let me say it first. I have a total of 12 flying swords. You can leave or stay as you wish." As soon as the voice fell, the little thoughts in everyone's heart instantly collapsed. He fought with the powerhouse of the same level in a face-to-face encounter. Wasn't it over with one sword to kill the existence of the Heaven Dipper realm from the early stage to the high stage? So everyone didn't dare to be noisy. They all stood aside obediently, waiting for the winner between the wine-sword Xian and Miao Chun. 1,000 days drunk. Seeing that everyone no longer moved, the wine-sword Xian's gaze fell on Miao Chun, whose limbs were crippled, and opened his mouth again. This time the sword didn't come from afar. The sword that the wine-sword Xian was leaning on trembled slightly, trying to escape from the shackles of the scabbard. It turned into a cold light and instantly pierced through Miao Chun's chest. Miao Chun's eyes were wide open. There was still a look of unwillingness in his eyes, but he slowly fell back. The aura on his body also dissipated the moment the sword pierced through his chest. An existence at the peak of the Heaven Dipper realm didn't even have the chance to make a move against the wine-sword Xian. Although the wine-sword Xian made 5 sword attacks, strictly speaking he only made 3 attacks from the beginning to the end. The people from the Demon Emperor Association will come over to take over the Feiyang Pavilion's assets. The Demon Emperor Association has a good grasp of the Feiyang Pavilion's assets. You should consider the consequences of lying and concealing the truth. The wine-sword Xian pulled out the 5 long swords from Miao Chun's body one by one. Then he tidied up his white robe and walked towards the Feiyang Pavilion's mountain gate. He muttered, "That's all you have. If I knew this would happen, I wouldn't have come personally. You delayed my drinking." How could this Sword King, who single-handedly killed the rebel army, be an existence that a mere leader of a sect in the northern frontier could challenge? The group of consecrators and elders of the Feiyang Pavilion also had a bitter expression. The little scheme in their hearts was also gone. While the Demon Emperor Association was growing stronger, the threshold to join was also terrifyingly low. Any cultivator who claimed to be a member of the Demon Emperor Association would be accepted. Of course, the Demon Emperor Association also had a set of identity screening procedures. It was just that outsiders didn't know about it, including those who were members. Chapter 358. Therefore, although everyone had their own identities on the surface, at least half of the consecrators and elders present were members of the Association of the Demon Emperor. After all, the Association of the Demon Emperor was backed by Lin Yuan, the Demon Emperor. No matter if it was the Northern Frontier King's residence, the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce, or even the black market, they had certain privileges. Naturally, they wouldn't turn a blind eye to these privileges. And to Lin Yuan, who controlled the Association of the Demon Emperor, the benefits in the eyes of others were just a little sweetness in his hands. In the Association of the Demon Emperor, as long as one could bring out a certain amount of evidence, they could use their information to exchange for a considerable amount of reward. Of course, if the same information was sold by someone else first, then you naturally wouldn't be able to get the reward, unless you could continue to supplement the information or expose that the information was a complete lie. Similarly, some merchants and cultivators were also used to buying information from the Association of the Demon Emperor. The Association of the Demon Emperor, which was previously encircled by the Xuanhu dynasty, had become an indispensable force in the northern frontier. Most people in the northern frontier didn't even want to provoke the Association of the Demon Emperor. Subsequently, a large number of people from the Association of the Demon Emperor went straight to the Flying Sun Pavilion and quickly handed over the current assets of the Flying Sun Pavilion. Even the library where Miao Chun strictly set the reading rules when he was alive was completely emptied. Even the rumored thunder technique, whose authenticity was unknown, fell into Sherdong's hands and was prepared to hand it over to the Demon Emperor. However, before this thunder technique fell into Sherdong's hands, it was unknown how many copies had been copied. No matter what kind of creature it was, they would always have their own selfish motives. Lin Yuan never minded that his subordinates had their own selfish motives. If a person followed you without any desires, it would be fine if they were just friends. But if they were superior and subordinate, then you would have to be afraid. Soon, the news of the Flying Sun Pavilion's destruction spread throughout the northern frontier. Like Miao Chun, most of the first-rate sects who had issued the order to rescue the smaller sects could no longer sit still. After all, no one had expected Lin Yuan's subordinates to be able to burst forth with such terrifying power in an instant. Previously, when both sides were on good terms, they all felt that Lin Yuan and his subordinates were just nouveau riche. They seemed to be powerful, but they were completely supported by the Xuanhuan mountain range's monstrous beasts. If they really fought, they could easily crush the association of the Demon Emperor and the northern frontier's Wang residents. Within 4 hours, 1/3 of the sects in the northern frontier had been wiped out. Even the Flying Sun Pavilion, a first-rate sect, had been annihilated by the association of demon monarchs. This made them tremble with fear. After all, the association of demon monarchs had the ability to annihilate first-rate sections. If the association of demon monarchs could annihilate the Flying Sun Pavilion, how could they not be annihilated? At the other side. At this moment, Lei Fan, who had returned to Shenning City, was looking at the reports of victory that were sent to him. He couldn't stop smiling. Now that the northern frontier was in a state of panic, the aristocratic families that weren't implicated were all watching the show peacefully. After all, in their opinion, they were ultimately different from the sections. The sects could indeed protect one side, but not only could the aristocratic families protect one side, they were also the strong and powerful economic pillars of the entire northern frontier. If they were to collapse, no matter how many spiritual items there were in the northern frontier, they wouldn't be able to sell as well as before. In this day and age, not everyone was qualified to cross the battlefield and come to the northern frontier to collect goods. The Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce was supplying goods to the outside world, and they would need the men of the aristocratic families. You would never be able to wake up a person who was pretending to be asleep. Just like how the aristocratic families were still indulging in their own fabricated dreams and didn't want to wake up. What the aristocratic families could do, the Northern Frontier Guard Corps couldn't do. Without the threat of the Xianhu dynasty and the Xuanhuan mountains, other than the sects, there weren't many forces that needed to mobilize the Northern Frontier Guard Corps. If it wasn't for the fact that 600,000 men wasn't a lot to begin with, and even if Lin Yuan didn't contact the Northern Frontier Prince's residence to sell spiritual items, Lei Fan would have long taken the lead to request for a reduction in the army. Now, the Northern Frontier sects only had one feeling towards the Northern Frontier Prince's residence and the association of the Demon Emperor: fear. At this stage, Lei Fan's objective had been completely achieved. As long as the sects were afraid, they would definitely form an alliance. Although the sects wouldn't easily make a move against the Northern Frontier Prince's residence, even if the Northern Frontier Prince's residence was loyal to the Black Snake, they were still nominally under the Xianhu dynasty. Once they took the initiative to stir up trouble, it wouldn't be any different from a rebellion. The reason why the Azure Peng King was able to rebel was firstly because his surname was Lei. Secondly, it was because Lei Qiuming had a high reputation in the military. Therefore, he was able to swiftly mobilize hundreds of thousands of troops for his own use. However, the sects in the northern frontier didn't have this ability. Even if they added up to hundreds of thousands of men, in terms of combat strength, the underworld and the regular army were two different things. Didn't you see how those small sects didn't have any resistance in front of the Northern Frontier Guard Corps? Lord of the Northern Frontier, why are you smiling so happily? Did something good happen? Hu Yen, who was dressed in armor, strode into the office shared by the 7 city lords. He took a sip of tea and his eyes were filled with smiles. Hu Yen, who was born in an aristocratic family, didn't have a good impression of the sections. Moreover, his current boss, Lin Yuan, had an irreconcilable relationship with the sections. Usually, the Hu family had been suppressed by the sections. Now that there was an opportunity to take revenge, Hu Yen naturally wouldn't miss it. Of course it's something good. Lei Fan put down the reports in his hands and spread his hands out with a smile. The various sects in the northern frontier have already started to prepare for the alliance. Don't you think that's a good thing? Hu Yen was slightly stunned and a tinge of doubt flashed across his eyes. But very quickly a faint smile flashed across Hu Yan's face. You mean, that's right. The various sects have people from the Demon Emperor Association. Moreover, the alliance has just been established and no one will be willing to submit to anyone. Just creating a little bit of friction will be enough to blow things up. We can make use of this opportunity to implement the new policies that we had previously. The smile on Lei Fan's face didn't change, but his eyes were flashing with a cold glint as he said in a cold voice. Once the new policies are signed, even those super first-rate forces with Void Realm cultivators can forget about being an exception. Otherwise, there won't be any place for them in the 7 dynasties. And if they don't let us sign the new policies, Then the super first-rate sects in the northern frontier will no longer have a need to exist. Without these cannon fodders, they will have no choice but to move out of the northern frontier sooner or later. At that time, our goal will still be achieved. Hu Yan's voice was similarly cold as he continued his sentence. Following that, he sighed with emotion, Lord Dragon King is still the best. To be able to play these sects and forces in the palm of his hand. No matter what they choose, it won't affect our plan. Chapter 359. The movement techniques of the illusionary god sect are only SOSO. The last Heaven Star border realm cultivator who tried to escape was killed by the halberd 100 miles away. Only then did Xianxia lick his lips, as if he had not had enough, as a hint of regret flashed across his eyes. He had been hiding in the northern frontier for many years. Back then, the valiant general who charged into the battlefield had restrained his killing intent due to an unspoken rule in the Jianghu continent. He obediently squatted in Shunning City, bearing the title of Protector. Other than the battle with the Fire Kirin, the last time he fought was more than 10 years ago, and it was to take care of a group of ignorant heretic cultivators from the Xuanhuan dynasty. The various forces abided by the rule that desolate demons and Kongming realm cultivators were not allowed to casually attack low-level cultivators. This was the same for the monsters that they treated as supplements. However, the heretic cultivators who were also humans were not included in this rule. These people spent all their time thinking about overthrowing the rule of humans, summoning an indescribable existence from the endless void to rule this world. Towards these brainless lunatics no one cared about the rules. The corners of Qin Guanshan and Shui Yan's mouths twitched as a hint of fear flashed across their eyes. Originally, it was a fight to the death between them and Lin Yuan, and the outcome of the battle was as expected. When everyone stopped underestimating Lin Yuan and fought with him, Lin Yuan's method of instantly killing a Heaven Star border realm cultivator was not used. Other than those airborne realm cultivators who were just there to make up the numbers, the greatest result of the battle was the lightning cultivator that Lin Yuan killed after grasping the opponent's attack rhythm. However, when Xianxia entered the battlefield, everyone knew what true strength was. Even if the remaining Heaven Star border realm cultivators used all their methods, they could only delay him for a little while. When Senior Su and Li Chang were both killed by Xianxia, the Heaven Star border realm cultivator who roared out the sound wave immediately used his sect's famous movement technique to escape. The moment he moved, he had already appeared dozens of miles away. With such speed, they would not be able to catch up even if they risked their lives. However, in front of Xianxia, this protector only glanced at him before casually throwing out the halberd in his hand, killing the illusionary god sect cultivator easily. No wonder the Xuanhuan dynasty only sent one Heaven Star border realm cultivator to guard this place. As long as the desolate demons in the Hengduan mountain range did not come out, the northern frontier would be able to maintain a stable situation where the Hengduan mountain range. Black Snake, you have chosen a good path. However, it is a pity that you have affected the interests of too many people. If you are determined to take this path, you will definitely die in less than 3 years. Xianxia did not even bother to pick up his halberd as his eyes revealed a trace of fatigue. It was not because of how tiring it was to suppress a group of Heaven Star border realm cultivators, but because it was simply boring. Senior, what can you teach me? Lin Yuan coiled up his snake body as a ray of light flashed across his heterochromatic eyes. What he wanted to do had indeed affected the interests of too many people. The so-called foundation of the aristocratic families and sects would be smashed and broken bit by bit in the face of Lin Yuan's reforms, until these existences no longer had the power to challenge Lin Yuan. They would either live within the rules that Lin Yuan had set for them, or be wiped out by Lin Yuan. Those aristocratic families and sects would obviously not sit and wait for that day to come. Even if what Lin Yuan said was true, that what he had set off was the tide of the era, and that anyone who tried to resist would be directly crushed, it was obvious that they would die regardless of whether they fought or not. These people would obviously not let Lin Yuan have an easy time. At worst, both sides would just perish together. Your new policies are not bad. The benefits are in the present and the merits are in the future. However, the world will not tolerate this, so you cannot do these things. The reason is that your body is not strong enough to make everyone fear you. Xianxia's eyes slightly narrowed as he pondered for a moment, then slowly said, therefore you have two options now. One is to join forces with Lei Qiuxing and quickly eliminate the internal and external problems of the Xuanhuan dynasty. Then you can hand over your new policies to Lei Qiuxing. This old man has been dissatisfied with the sects and aristocratic families for a long time. However, even if the aristocratic families were destroyed, there would always be a branch that would appear out of nowhere and continue to carry the banner of the aristocratic families. No matter how good Lei Qiuxing is at killing, he would not be able to wipe out everyone in the Xuanhu dynasty, right? Yan Xingqi's suggestion made Lin Yuan's eyes light up. Handing over the new policies to Lei Qiuxing was indeed much more suitable than doing it himself. This overbearing king also did not like other voices in his country. The number of sects and aristocratic families that Lei Qiuxing found excuses to suppress and destroy was more than the total number of sects and aristocratic families in the northern frontier combined. However, there was no suitable way to wipe them out completely. Would your meritorious subordinates be rewarded? After the rewards, these fellows would become the new aristocratic families. Lin Yuan's method was not purely to destroy them, but to directly cut off their foundation. So what if there were aristocratic families everywhere? Once they jumped out of Lin Yuan's rules, Lei Qiuxing could easily label them as rebels and then clean up these disobedient people. Even the imperial censors would have to obediently shut their mouths. Who would be willing to be associated with a group of rebels? May I ask, Senior, since there is one, then there will be 2 and 3, right? In the end, Yan Xingqi was an old senior who had more experience than the younger generation. Yan Xingqi's casual suggestion was enough to benefit Lin Yuan greatly. After all, he had never thought of joining hands with the indigenous powers of Sky Martial Continent to reform. In his eyes, even a king like Lei Qiuxing was an existence that was similar to a burden. What was the difference between the imperial family and the aristocratic families? They were just slightly bigger aristocratic families. That's right. Although this plan is safe and feasible, but you have to know that when you see Lei Qiuxing as your greatest enemy, Lei Qiuxing also has no reason to let you go. If you were just a noble in the northern frontier, it would be fine. But you were born in the Hengduan mountain range, and have the blood of the dragon clan flowing in your body. As such, the 2 great demonic beast groups are inextricably linked to you. Compared to the aristocratic families and sects, you, the Black Snake, are more of a threat to Lei Qiuxing. However, since the new policies were created by you, if anything were to happen, Lei Qiuxing would naturally find someone to take the blame and implicate you. In the short term, he will not be able to touch you, nor will he be able to touch you. If you grow fast enough before Lei Qiuxing's blade cuts your neck, you will already have the qualifications to wrestle with him. At that time, he can only grit his teeth and swallow it in his stomach. Yan Xingqi's eyes shone brightly. As an existence that was on par with Lei Qiuxing in the past, even if he had been hidden for decades, Yan Xingqi's foresight was sufficiently shrewd. Chapter 360. However, this old man's second path still depends on you. After all, the Xuanhu dynasty is currently in a mess. Even if you wisely chose to retreat in order to advance, helping Lei Qiuxing stabilize the situation while also stabilizing your position as the god of the northern frontier, no one can deny that with your example, the entire Xuanhu dynasty is now impetuous. Otherwise, the Qingping king wouldn't have directly started an uprising. If you don't want to take the safe path, you might as well directly fall out with Lei Qiuxing and quickly eliminate the Xuanhu dynasty that has been lurking in the northern frontier for a long time. You will also defeat the sects and suppress the aristocratic families. In a short period of time, you will become the enemy of the entire world. However, the advantage of doing this is that as long as you don't infringe on the interests of those top-notch figures, and with this old man's support, there will be many people who want to beat you up, but those who really make a move will basically be within your capabilities. If you take this path, the only 2 requirements are that you are fierce enough and ruthless enough. Furthermore, you have to keep up with your growth speed. At least before this mess is settled by Lei Qiuxing, you have to grow to the point where Lei Qiuxing will splash blood on you. You, who have control of the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce and the Fey Trade, already have the initial requirements. Therefore, what you need to do now is, at this point, Yan Xingqi paused and said with a gloomy expression, increase your own strength and at the same time have more control over the northern frontier. Otherwise, xianxia won't kill you, Black Snake, and casually help a nobody to take over the foundation that you have painstakingly built. Lin Yuan didn't continue the conversation and maintained his silence while revealing a thoughtful expression. Yan Xingqi was a fierce general who had been on the battlefield for many years. His strategic foresight was extremely accurate. The 2 suggestions he gave were both feasible. The first one was for Lei Qiuxing to fight with his life on the line, and the winner would definitely be Lei Qiuxing. However, after Lei Qiuxing won against the aristocratic families and sects, the first one to be dealt with would be Lin Yuan. The second option was to let Lin Yuan risk his life. As long as he could protect the base in his hands, Lei Qiuxing wouldn't be able to touch him for the time being. And Lei Qiuxing, who coveted the stability and unification of the northern frontier, would also take this path. However, this would allow Lin Yuan to enter the stage of power struggle in advance, and at the same time, weaken the enemies that Lin Yuan would have to face. After all, Lei Qiuxing wanted to walk the same path as Lin Yuan. Naturally, he wouldn't sit and watch Lin Yuan fall. Wouldn't that give those aristocratic families and sects the opportunity to spread rumors that Lin Yuan's path was evil? At that time, not to mention dealing with Lin Yuan in private, even some of the new national policies would lean towards supporting Lin Yuan. Lin Yuan pondered for a moment, then suddenly laughed and said loudly, "Senior has been hiding for dozens of years, and you still have such shrewd eyes. It seems that Lei Qiuxing's ability isn't that great after all." Lin Yuan's words were full of flattery, but more of a warning. After all, Xianxia could help Lin Yuan come up with a plan, and had the confidence to support Lin Yuan. This meant that Xianxia wasn't as quiet as he seemed on the surface. He was just waiting for an opportunity to come back and compete with Lei Qiuxing. And now that Lin Yuan had taken over the northern frontier, obviously, Xianxia saw the opportunity to defeat that famous warrior of the past. Xianxia stroked his beard and didn't say anything. But in his heart, he silently complained for a while. If Lei Qiuxing really didn't have the ability, then why did Winesword Mystery, who was at the peak of Heaven Dipper realm, hide in the northern frontier? Why couldn't the remaining members of the Jiao clan, who were supported by all the local officials of the dynasty, survive after leaving the Hengduan mountains? Xianxia was a void nether realm warrior. Why would he stay in the northern frontier for dozens of years? Lei Qiuxing not only had the ability to recognize people, he also knew how to use them and dared to use them. Even if he was afraid of Xianxia, he still only exiled him to the bitter cold northern frontier to guard his door. Because although Lei Qiuxing had a headache over them, but if both sides really went all out, Lei Qiuxing could still completely control them. Even Xianxia, who couldn't win against Lei Qiuxing in the past, had reached the void nether realm for such a long time. How could Lei Qiuxing's strength stop at the Heaven Dipper realm? It was nothing more than Lei Qiuxing deceiving others for the sake of carrying out some of his plans. All these years, because of Lei Qiuxing's constant suppression of the aristocratic families and sects, it wasn't as if there were no void-tier cultivators who had infiltrated the imperial capital to assassinate Lei Qiuxing, but in the end, didn't they all end up without any news? However, this black snake that jumped out of Lei Qiuxing's calculations did indeed let Xianxia see a glimmer of hope. A glimmer of hope to defeat that man. The man and the snake looked at each other for a while, then Xianxia finally let go of his hand that was stroking his beard, and said with a smile, "Looks like Lord Dragon King has already made his decision. Then I should go and make some preparations. Goodbye. I won't see you out." Lin Yuan nodded slightly, then turned his head to look at Qin Guanshan and Shui Yan beside him, and whispered a few words to them. The two of them then followed Xianxia's path towards the exit of the secret territory. Lin Yuan, who was standing at the same spot, was silent for a while, then he laughed coldly. Lei Fan, being too ambitious is not a good thing. I hope you don't go overboard and cause everyone to be unable to clean up the mess." As his voice fell, Lin Yuan's body shook, and he abruptly flew towards the palace in the center of the secret territory. After Lin Yuan's figure had completely disappeared, a huge figure slowly appeared. A ferocious scarlet snake tail wrapped around the tortoiseshell, and it said with a vicious tone, "Xuanhuan, you have guarded Lord's tomb for so many years, and you just watched as that black Jiao disturbed Lord's peace?" The tortoiseshell called Xuanhuan was silent for a while, then he slowly replied, "Ingtian, you and I are one. Even that old monk could see through my thoughts. Must you ask the obvious? Those fellows could come back at any time, and with one more person who knows the inside story, our strength will increase. Compared to this world, do you think Lord's peace is more important?" The golden relic also flew out from the tortoiseshell, chanting Buddha's name, Amitabha, to be able to maintain his state of mind under the influence of that evil being, and to be able to understand our language. This black Jiao is either the son of some great person, or a powerful being who has reincarnated. With him around, this world will indeed be more stable. After all, he is an existence who has survived the sea of bitterness as a spirit. Xuanhuan leisurely continued the relic's words, his voice carrying a hint of self-mockery. "We have already fallen to such a state, and even if we want to protect this world, we can't do it anymore. Why don't we just hand it over to that young man and let him fight for us? Being suppressed in this Sumeru world like this, there is nothing bad about it, it's just that the old monk is chanting scriptures every day. It's too noisy." Yes. Ing Tian nodded his head, agreeing with Xuanhuan's last sentence. Chapter 361. Time flowed like water. In the blink of an eye, 3 days had passed. Master Xuan sat in the meditation hall and cultivated. 3 days ago, all the major sects gave up their bases that they had been operating for many years without hesitation. After dismissing a large number of disciples, They brought their elites to the Freedom Yard for the purpose of contending against the northern frontier Wangfu. If it was only second-rate or third-rate sects that were swept away, they could still sit back and watch the northern region Lord Mansion perform. However, as a first-rate sect, the Flying Sun Pavilion was actually uprooted on the same day. Even the sect's assets fell into the hands of the Association of Demon Emperors. This was something that they couldn't help but be fearful of. Miao Chun was in existence at the peak of the Heaven Dipper realm. Even if he wasn't in the first sequence, he was still a famous expert. However, according to insiders, Miao Chun couldn't even last 3 moves against the Association of the Demon Emperors member who called himself Jiu Jianxian. Yes, 3 moves. 1 move and 2 swords were also 3 moves. Furthermore, everyone could tell that the reason why Miao Chun was able to withstand 3 moves was because the Wine Sword Profound was deliberately intimidating the people of the Flying Sun Pavilion. Otherwise, the moment Miao Chun stepped out of the courtyard, the Wine Sword Profound would have easily pierced Miao Chun's heart. Therefore, the various sects could not sit still, and all of them came to the Freedom Courtyard to seek refuge. Who asked the Freedom Yard to have 3 Void Realm cultivators. Xuan, Xuanhuan, and Kuhai, the 3 masters were famous in the northern frontier for many years. Even Yin Xingqi and the 3 great beast kings didn't dare to provoke the Freedom Yard. A mere black snake in the northern frontier Wangfu dared to cause trouble in the Freedom Yard? Abbot, it's not good. It's not good. A young monk wearing a yellow robe rushed into Master Xuan's meditation hall. He was crying with a young and tender face. Even his voice sounded like he was about to cry. Master Xuan, who was offended by the young monk, frowned slightly. However, he couldn't bear to reprimand him when he saw the young monk's dejected face. He slowly stood up from the praying mat, shook off the non-existent dust on his red robe and said in a deep voice, "My Buddha oversees the heavens. Even if the extraterritorial sky demon descends, the Freedom Yard can still become a pure land. What happened to make you so flustered?" Someone died. The young novice monk was startled by Master Xuan's frown, but he quickly explained the reason. With all the major sects and forces gathered near the repose courtyard, the northern frontier duke's mansion indeed did not have the guts to touch them. But under the deterrence of Lin Yuan, Lei Fan, who had been an obedient child for so long, had just taken control of the situation and viciously bit down on those major sects and forces. Even though he knew what it meant to show mercy wherever possible, and clearly knew that he had already achieved great results in the battle, he was still unwilling to let the matter drop just like that. He had been thinking of ways to incite conflict between both sides all this while. Due to the activities of some members of the Association of the Demon Emperor, a young sect master of a first-rate sect had killed a rich young master who had argued with him in order to win a smile from a beauty. If it was during normal times, this matter would have been reduced to a small matter. At most, the first-rate sect would have held a banquet to apologize and give enough face to the young master's family. In the end, they would have promised some benefits and this matter would have been over. But what was the situation now? Anyone with a discerning eye could see that the northern frontier duke's mansion had taken action for real this time. Cultivators of the Void Realm were not allowed to interfere, and without the existence of Void Realm cultivators, they would not be able to win against the northern frontier duke's mansion. Therefore, the sects and forces could be said to be on the verge of collapse. Although some of the more astute aristocratic families had sensed that something was wrong, but they still believed that this was a good opportunity. The greed in their nature did not allow them to choose the method of settling this privately, as they had done in the past. Instead, they chose to report this matter to the authorities, and directly shoved this matter into the hands of the northern frontier duke's mansion. Of course, with the support of the Freedom Courtyard, they had to stand up for the sects under their protection for the sake of their reputation. If the power of the aristocratic families reporting to the authorities was average, the Freedom Courtyard could directly suppress the northern frontier duke's mansion and give them a chance to mediate privately. Unfortunately, the aristocratic families of the northern frontier had multiplied for so many years, especially the Qiao family, an ancient family with a history of nearly 1,000 years. Not to mention how many aristocratic families in the northern frontier relied on the Qiao family for survival. If there was a chance, these aristocratic families would all want to have a marriage alliance with the Qiao family. Putting aside the complicated relationship, that unfortunate rich young master would have to call the current head of the Qiao family granduncle. Although the relationship between the Qiao family and the northern frontier duke's mansion had not been made public, they were already in cahoots in private. Naturally, they would not let go of this opportunity to suppress the sects. Therefore, the one who took the lead to report that the young sect master had killed someone was actually an old master of the Qiao family's direct line of descent. With the request of a Heavenly Dipper realm expert, the Northern Frontier Duke's mansion naturally had no reason to be biased towards the sections. Moreover, the relationship between the two parties had already reached a point where it would only end with one party dead. As a matter of fact, the troops of the Northern Frontier Duke's mansion had directly stopped at the entrance of the Freedom Courtyard, demanding for them to hand over the culprit to be punished. One must know that when aristocratic families wanted to borrow the power of the imperial court, they would secretly give some money, spirit items and other resources to their own stewards, allowing them to communicate with the authorities. Even the side branches would rarely make an appearance. This time, even the old master of the Qiao family's direct line of descent had made an appearance. How could this matter be suppressed? Therefore, the Freedom Courtyard had no choice but to throw this trouble to the three seniors who were meditating in seclusion. After listening to the young novice monk's words, Master Xuan gnashed his teeth in hatred. Anyone with a discerning eye could see that this was the Shifter Emperor's Association deliberately digging a hole for the young sect master to jump into. Otherwise, this matter would not have been blown out of proportion. This young sect master was really king idiot. What time was it now? Not only did he run out to indulge in wine and women, but he even king killed a young master of an aristocratic family for a woman. However, this matter could not be blamed on the young sect master. After all, the Duke's mansion of the northern frontier was serious, and the sects were already in a state of panic. If the news spread that they were beaten by the Duke's mansion of the northern frontier and had to seek the protection of the Freedom Courtyard, most of their disciples would leave in an instant. Therefore, to their disciples, they only said that the Freedom Courtyard was holding a grand event and invited all the sects to attend. Therefore, this young sect master was confused and thought that he was the kind of young master who could call the wind and summon the rain in the northern frontier. Not to mention killing someone. If the aristocratic family was not big, it was not impossible for him to directly exterminate the entire family. Master, this matter, how should we deal with it? The young novice monk who was pushed over to ask for Master Xuan's opinion, had a bitter expression on his face. Even with his small brain, he could tell that if it weren't for the fact that the matter was tricky, how could those masters in the Freedom Yard, whose mouths were full of oil, find trouble for themselves by asking for the help of three senior masters who had titles but didn't care about worldly affairs and focused on cultivation? Chapter 362. Master Xuan glanced at the unlucky kid, shook his head and said nothing. How should he deal with this? He just couldn't understand why those brats had to get themselves into such trouble. What kind of existence was that black snake? That was an existence who dared to kill the fire Qilin of the desolate demon realm when he was only at the peak of wisdom state. Furthermore, he planned meticulously, and even plotted against him and xianxia step by step. In the end, he even killed the old demon beast, the fire Qilin, with his own hands. Thinking about it carefully after returning to the Freedom Courtyard, Master Xuan was so shocked that he broke out in cold sweat. How much did your martial uncles take from them to agree to protect them? Master Xuan was silent for a moment, and decided to ask about the price first. If it really didn't work, the Freedom Yard would pay double the price to send them away. 1/3 of each family's property. The young novice shrunk his neck guiltily and whispered. When Master Xuan asked, he already knew what this senior was planning. After all, in the jianghu, who wouldn't offend a few existences that they couldn't afford to offend? Didn't the so-called divine sects and jianghu legends of the northern frontier come to make a living at this time? They would step out to protect those who had nowhere else to go, and then take a huge sum of money from those who were protected. Most of the time, they didn't even need to do anything. Which cultivator and jianghu wouldn't give each other face? However, no matter how famous they were, there would always be a time when they couldn't protect themselves. For example, at this moment, Master Xuan was determined not to get into trouble, so he wanted to follow the rules of the jianghu and give them 3 times the promised benefits, and then send them away safely. This was the most benevolent thing he could do. After hearing the young novice monk's offer, Master Xuan gasped in shock. There were many sects of all sizes in the northern frontier. What did it mean for each family to own 1/3 of their property? Even if they sold all the golden statues that the pilgrims in the Freedom Yard spent a lot of money to make, they still wouldn't be able to gather enough money to send these demons away. Therefore, the Freedom Yard had to take care of this matter, and they had to take care of it well. Otherwise, who would respect the Freedom Yard in the future? Master Xuan really wished he could slap all these brainless juniors to death. Now that the young sect master had committed a crime and was hiding in the Freedom Courtyard, the Northern Region Lord's palace had valiantly come to the Freedom Courtyard to demand for him. Putting aside the Northern Region Lord's palace and the association of the Shifter Emperor, there were still many aristocratic families behind this matter. If the Freedom Courtyard couldn't give a satisfactory explanation, they wouldn't let this matter go so easily. Not give. The Northern Region King Palace dared to forcefully tear down the Freedom Courtyard and lock them up. If the Freedom Courtyard resisted, they would be labeled as traitors. At that time, even if they had 3 Void Realm cultivators, they wouldn't be able to do anything. No dynasty would take in a bunch of traitors. At that time they would have to cross the ocean and hide. They would be even worse than those evil cultivators hiding in the dark. Even if the Repose Courtyard's reputation was ruined, no matter how many powerhouses there were in the Repose Courtyard or how outstanding their techniques were, the cultivation forces would never give them any face in the future. Even those young men who wanted to cultivate had to look at the reputation of the sect before they wanted to be apprenticed. Perhaps after this matter was over, the Repose Courtyard would never be able to receive a single outstanding disciple in the future. Master Xuan almost burst into tears. It was too difficult. It was really too difficult. Let's go out and take a look. After thinking for a while, Master Xuan walked out of the temple. Although he didn't have the confidence to protect the young master, but he had participated in the killing of Huaqiran. He had some ties with Lei Fan and Lin Yuan. Although he had done it for the sake of the Lei family, but now, if he wanted to use this matter to plead for mercy, Lei Fan and Lin Yuan wouldn't take him seriously. The young master couldn't be saved. But if the royal residents of the northern frontier wanted to use this matter to destroy a sect, then he would not agree to it. In the end, just as he walked out of the temple, Master Xuan felt a darkness in front of him. When he raised his head, he saw a black snake about 10,000 feet long circling in the sky above the Freedom Yard. One of its eyes was blue, and the other was the color of ice. It was coldly looking at the Freedom Yard. Although he didn't know why, Master Xuan could feel that the black snake was looking at him. Xuan of the Freedom Yard. Greetings to the Dragon King of the Northern Frontier. The sinister look in Master Xuan's eyes disappeared in an instant and was replaced by a smile. Lin Yuan nodded calmly. There was no change in his eyes. He said in a low voice, Master Xuan has been in charge of the Northern Frontier for many years and has a great reputation. And this is not the first time you have met this king. There is no need to be so polite. More and more cultivators gathered. Looking at Lin Yuan circling in the sky, they were all speechless. What kind of F***king monster was this? In less than a year and a half, it went from a beast without any cultivation to a mountain lord monster capable of flight. Furthermore, the pressure it exuded was so strong that some airborne realm cultivators couldn't help but kneel down as soon as they saw Lin Yuan, as if they were worshipping a high and mighty god. The Dragon King is here, and the Freedom Yard. Master Xuan, the laws of the Northern Frontier are strict, and this king has made sure that the new laws of the Northern Frontier have been distributed to every household. As such, you should know that anyone who kills without reason within the jurisdiction of the Northern Frontier, regardless of whether they are humans or monsters, will have to pay with their lives in the best-case scenario. Master Xuan, you should know that this king is now the god of the Northern Frontier conferred by the dynasty, and he has the responsibility of governing the monsters in the Northern Frontier. If this most basic rule is broken, there will be no trade in the Northern Frontier in the future. Wouldn't any person or monster dare to wantonly wage war within the jurisdiction of the Northern Frontier? Before Master Xuan's voice fell, Lin Yuan had already interrupted Master Xuan. I know, but the culprit is just a child. I hope that Lord Dragon King can make things easier for me. What a joke. The murderer is a child, but the one who died in my house is not a child? I may not be young, but the elders in my family are still around, and I can still be considered a child. Can't I just kill a few disciples of the Freedom Yard and then say that I am a child and ask the Northern Frontier to make things easier for me? This time, the one who interrupted Master Xuan was not Lin Yuan, but the master of the Qiao clan who went to report to the authorities. He was at level 7 of the Heaven Star realm and ranked 4th in the Qiao clan. He was usually responsible for teaching the disciples of the Qiao clan to cultivate. He had no talent in business or family management, but he was good at fighting and killing, and his voice was also surprisingly loud. Chapter 363. Pfft. As soon as 4th Master Qiao finished speaking, the generals of the Northern Frontier Guard Army could not help but burst into laughter. For a rough man in his 60s to call him a child in front of so many people, those who had not received special training would find it hard to hold back their laughter. Even though they had deliberately lowered their voices, everyone present was a cultivator with decent cultivation. Their 5 senses were far superior to that of ordinary people, so they naturally heard the sneers. However, 4th Master Qiao, who was the laughing stock, did not have an uncomfortable expression. On the contrary, Master Xuan's face had completely darkened. In any case, he was a void realm cultivator, yet he had been interrupted twice in a row. Moreover, fourth Master Qiao had directly declared that he would kill a disciple of the Freedom Courtyard. For such a thing to happen to him, not to mention a monk, even Buddha would be somewhat angry. Make things easier? Lin Yuan's heterochromatic vertical pupils slightly trembled as he softly muttered. Then Lin Yuan raised his head and said in an icy tone, Master Qian's face is naturally useful. In the northern frontier, which cultivator would not give you some face? Unfortunately, the northern frontier does not care about face, only rules. If it was a private matter between you and me, not only would I make things easier, I would also have to respect you as an elder. But this is official business. There is only one choice for official business in the northern frontier, and that is to strictly enforce the new northern frontier law. If this matter was different, Lin Yuan would really have to give face to a Void Realm senior. However, this involved the most basic rule of the northern frontier law, a life for a life. Lin Yuan naturally could not take even half a step back. If the Freedom Courtyard straightforwardly handed over the person to them, Lin Yuan would feel that it was dull, and his spirit would also be dampened. But the Freedom Courtyard wanted to protect the person? Then I'm sorry. This daddy is here to slap your face. If I don't take you, the number one sect in the northern frontier, as an example, who would take the new northern frontier law seriously? Then there's no room for discussion? Master Qian's gloomy face didn't change, but a sinister look appeared in his eyes again. He could directly kill Lin Yuan, and the 3 Kongming realm cultivators of the Freedom Courtyard would take action. Not to mention Lin Yuan, even the guards of the northern region who planned to come to the door and arrest them would not be able to escape. However, this was the Qianhu continent, not some secret realm or Sumeru world. The Freedom Courtyard did not want to become a rebel, and Master Qian did not want to become the prey of those demon beasts in the desolate demon realm of the Hengduan Mountains. Therefore he could only stare hatefully at Lin Yuan, but he did not have the courage to attack. Naturally, his aura had weakened. There's nothing to talk about. Get him. There was not even a ripple in Lin Yuan's eyes. He had obtained the inheritance of an ancient power from the secret territory and knew some secrets. Therefore Lin Yuan was now clear about where the existences of the Kongming realm and above were gathered and what they were doing. Compared to those terrible enemies, the so-called sects and the 7 great empires were like clay chickens and pottery dogs in Lin Yuan's eyes. They were not worth mentioning at all. Let them pass. Seeing that Lin Yuan was determined to take them, Master Qian glared at Lin Yuan, and could only helplessly let them pass. After saying this, Master Qian was too lazy to care about what would happen in the future. Anyway, he was sure that from now on, there would be no place for sects and forces like them to take root in the northern region. Other than the cultivators who were willing to join the Northern Region Academy and become instructors, all of them had either died under the continuous persecution of the Black Snake or left the Northern Region because they could not bear the pressure. If the foundations of the sects could not be preserved, what was the use of face? It was better to go back and think of a way out and find a good place to settle down. Lin Yuan's unyielding action just now had already shown that he didn't want to cover up this matter this time. Instead, he wanted to strike while the iron was hot and humiliate the Freedom Courtyard first. Then, similar things would continue to happen to the disciples of these sections. Even if the sects strictly guarded them, they couldn't prevent the traitor of the Demon Emperor's association in their own sect, right? Soon, a group of Beijing guards who had received the imperial edict dragged out a young master wearing a moon-white robe. This young master's appearance was not bad, but his eyes were a little dim, and his eye bags were not shallow. He looked like a waxy head who had indulged too much in debauchery and had been robbed of everything by wine, women, and greed. Now that he was being dragged out by the Beijing guards, he was so scared that he cried out for his father to save him. Unfortunately, the expression on his father's face did not change from beginning to end, as if the young master who was being dragged away was not his son at all. This was because he knew very well that if the Freedom Courtyard could not protect someone, what could his first-rate sect, whose strength was far below theirs, do? If he did not speak up now, it would be fine if one of his sons died. If he spoke up, his whole family might be wiped out. However, just because he did not speak up did not mean that others would not speak up. This Black Snake has no intention of letting our sect disciples live. Today, the young sect master of the Fish and Water sect was taken away. Who knows who else will be taken away tomorrow? If we swallow this humiliation, we will all be treated as examples of the new laws of the northern frontier, and be beheaded in public. Someone in the crowd yelled out. The group of sect disciples suddenly came to their senses, and they all looked at the northern frontier guards with ferocious eyes. Today they could kill their fellow cultivators and not themselves, but if all of their fellow cultivators died, they would have to die even if they did not. Clang, 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 the sound of countless sharp swords being unsheathed rang out. Even if some of the more astute people wanted to stop them, it was too late. These sect disciples immediately rushed forward with red eyes and fought with the Beijing guards who had been prepared for this. In an instant there were flashes of swords and sabers everywhere. All kinds of blood and broken limbs flew everywhere. The peaceful place of Buddhism had been turned into a bloody purgatory. Release the signal flare and call for help. Zhang Qilin, who was in charge of arresting the criminals, pulled out his saber expressionlessly. After giving the order, he rushed into the battle line and cut down a few sect disciples. Then he growled, "You are soldiers, so act like one. Don't fight like a bunch of ruffians. Don't tell others that you are my soldiers." Although Li Zhongxing and Zhang Qilin had brought Shen Linjun's reserve troops, they were still the most elite troops of the Xuanhu dynasty. Whether it was their combat strength or training methods, they were second to none. Therefore, with these reserve troops as the backbone to train the entire army, the 600,000 northern frontier guards were no longer the same as before. They were also proficient in the art of battle formations that soldiers must know if they wanted to increase their chances of survival on the battlefield. Chapter 364. After being reminded by Zhang Qilin, they all found familiar comrades and began to shrink from the long front line. It seemed that they were surrounded by the disciples of various sects, but in fact, from the originally evenly matched situation, it suddenly became a situation where 4 or 5 guards of Beijing faced one disciple of a sect at the same time. There were many disciples of various sects, but the field was blocked by the guards of the northern frontier. No matter how many people there were, they could only squeeze outside one by one. The pressure on the guards of the northern frontier was greatly reduced, and they could even defeat the disciples of various sects without spending much energy. Swoosh! A signal flare shot up. It suddenly exploded hundreds of meters high in the sky. In broad daylight, it actually lit up a gorgeous firework in the shape of a long red saber. This was a signal flare specially made by the guards of Beijing, which was specially used to call for reinforcements. It could be seen clearly within hundreds of miles, and the color of the signal flare was different depending on the opponent. For example, the disciples of various sects who needed a large number of reinforcements were the second most dangerous red saber. In addition, there were also white saber, who was used for warning, green saber, who needed small-scale reinforcements, blue saber, who needed the support of hundreds of people, and black saber, who was the most dangerous black saber, who even needed all the guards of the northern frontier to come out in full force. All of these were made step by step under the close discussion of Luo Su, Li Zhongxing, and others. "It's bad." Seeing the signal flare explode, Master Qin's expression suddenly became interesting. Lin Yuan was determined to slap the face of the Freedom Yard today, and someone suddenly fanned the flames. How could he not understand that the words just now were not because someone was indignant, but because Lin Yuan had long planned this play? In a moment, the guards of the northern frontier, who had been stationed nearby, would swarm here. At that time, all the disciples of various sects present would be killed, and perhaps even the Freedom Yard would be killed. How cruel. Master Qin waved his hand angrily and suppressed his desire to kill Lin Yuan again. With a pale face, he raised his voice and said, "Disciples of the Freedom Yard, enter the inner temple immediately. You are not allowed to participate in this armed fight. Violators will be expelled from the sect." Compared to the problem of face, Master Qin still prioritized the inheritance of the sect. Even if his current actions would cause the Freedom Yard to lose face, and even if some of the more radical disciples would directly betray the Freedom Yard, at least in the play that Lin Yuan had designed, he had successfully removed the Freedom Yard from the situation. When Ku Hai and Ku Xian saw that Master Qin had come out of seclusion, they didn't want to care about these worldly affairs. However, when they saw how shameless Master Qin was, they quickly figured out what was going on. They also began to call the disciples of the Freedom Courtyard to quickly enter the inner temple. They also ordered the disciples of the Freedom Courtyard to quickly enter the inner temple. They also ordered the disciples of the Freedom Courtyard to quickly enter the inner temple. They also ordered the disciples of the Freedom Courtyard to quickly enter the inner temple. They also ordered the disciples of the Freedom Courtyard to quickly enter the inner temple. Although after this matter was over, he would still be humiliated by Lin Yuan, but he still had to maintain enough face. At the very least, he could not allow Lin Yuan to carry out another great purge and drag the Freedom Yard into this quagmire. More and more soldiers of the Northern Frontier Guard Army joined the battle. Standing on the wall watching the battle, Master Qin felt more and more bitter in his heart. Although he had expected this, but it had really happened and he still felt his face burning. Originally, he had wanted to make use of Lin Yuan's relationship with Lei Fan to persuade Lin Yuan to be merciful this time. But in the end, Lin Yuan did not even put him in his eyes at all. Otherwise, he would not have prepared a spy to fan the flames, and even stationed a large number of the Northern Frontier Guard army near the Freedom Yard. He had still wanted to ask Lin Yuan to give him some face. But in the end, Lin Yuan did not even take him seriously. The battle lasted for a full hour. The front yard that the Freedom Yard was proud of, which was slowly carved out of a large piece of white jade, was completely dyed red with blood. Other than a few of the Northern Frontier Guard army who had been maimed and killed, almost all of the sect disciples who had participated in this battle, other than those who had long taken off their sect's uniform and attacked their own people, had died in this battle. Even some of the rather famous sect leaders and elders had not escaped. Of course, there were also a few sect leaders of the Heavenly Dipper realm who had long seen that something was wrong, and had directly abandoned their weapons and surrendered, allowing the Northern Frontier Guard army to take them down. They wanted to use their family's property to exchange for a way out. Otherwise, the casualties of the Northern Frontier Guard army would have been even greater. But that was all, because the victor of this battle had already been decided from the moment the script began. Standing on the wall, Master Xuan's face was cold as he said in a cold voice, "Lord Dragon King, the criminals have been killed on the spot, but you still do not leave. What is the meaning of this? Do you not even want to let go of the Freedom Yard?" Master Xuan had already been slapped in the face several times. At this moment, even if he had an indifferent temperament, he really could not bring out a good face to face Lin Yuan. Lin Yuan slowly landed on the ground, shrunk his body and said with a smile, "Master, you misunderstood me. Although I am a demonic beast, I am also fascinated by the Buddhism sect. If it was not necessary, why would I kill in the Buddhism sect? It's just that these sect disciples openly rebelled and attacked the Northern Frontier Guard army. If they are not uprooted, sooner or later they will become a big stain on the Northern Frontier. Master, what do you think?" The corner of Master Xuan's mouth twitched slightly. In his heart he thought, "You little bastard, you are very evil." All the major sects had come to seek the protection of the Freedom Courtyard. Of course, the Freedom Courtyard did not have such a large space, so only a portion of the disciples had gathered there. There were still many disciples hiding within the range of the Freedom Courtyard. This black snake was clearly someone who did not want to waste the effort to find it, and wanted the Freedom Courtyard to be a traitor. Alright, this little monk also hates these lawless people of the pugilistic world. I'll go and instruct my disciples to assist the lords in capturing those bandits hiding near my Freedom Courtyard. Master Xuan had already lost all his face, and it was not a big deal to lose it again. Even if he wanted to tear Lin Yuan apart, he had to make a concession at this moment. He threw the Freedom Yard's face to the ground and trampled on it. However, after Master Xuan's words, the Northern Frontier Guard army in the front yard still did not have the slightest intention to leave. Instead, they all looked at Master Xuan with ferocious smiles. What is the meaning of this? Seeing that Lin Yuan was still unforgiving, Master Xuan could no longer hold back and asked loudly. Lin Yuan shook his head and said lazily, "Master Xuan, you are so forgetful. There are so many thieves hiding in the Freedom Yard, and there may be one or two in the inner temple. For everyone's safety, please open the gate of the inner temple and let my people in to search. Then everyone will be at ease, right?" Chapter 365. As Lin Yuan's words fell, the cultivators of the repose court, including Master Xuan, felt as if a basin of ice water had been poured over them. Their bodies began to tremble uncontrollably. Going too far. These words appeared in the minds of all the disciples of the repose court at the same time. Their eyes were like sharp blades as they stared at Lin Yuan, wanting nothing more than to rip a piece of flesh from Lin Yuan's body. What sort of place was the repose court's inner temple? It was the burial ground of many of the repose court's predecessors, the place where the experts of the repose court cultivated, and also the place where the repose court's cultivation methods and various resources were accumulated. Not to mention Lin Yuan and the others who harbored enmity toward the repose court, even the disciples of the repose court would not be able to easily enter the inner temple if they did not have a certain level of qualifications and were on the northern frontier. Now, with just a few words from Lin Yuan, the repose court wanted to open the gates of the inner temple and let them in to search? What was the difference between this method and having the disciples of the repose court take off all their clothes in public? Zhang Qilin, who had just fought a battle, wiped the blood from his face and stepped forward. He loudly said, "Masters, you must think carefully. If you do not let us search the repose court today, it will be fine if these evil creatures who dared to openly attack the guards of the northern frontier are all cleaned up. But if one or two of them suddenly appear, I fear that you will not be able to wash away your suspicions. Extremely shameless. The cultivators of the repose court trembled even more violently. These guards of the northern frontier had not come to investigate the remnants of the sections. They simply wanted to investigate the wealth of the repose court. Even humiliating the repose court was only a secondary reason. But even though they knew of these people's wild ambitions, none of them dared to stand out and say a word of justice. The smell of blood in the front courtyard had yet to dissipate. Even from a distance they could smell the choking smell of blood in the air. And at this moment, the guards of the northern frontier standing in the sea of blood and corpses and shouting were all like the sky demon described in the Buddhist scriptures. No, they were even more detestable than the sky demon. Since the masters are not willing to do this, then forget it. Lin Yuan suddenly turned around and said with a cold smile, "After all, I still have to give face to Master Xuan. This king will make things easier for Master Xuan. I won't search the freedom courtyard. Let's go." Lin Yuan emphasized the words, "Do me a favor," as if he was afraid that Master Xuan would not be able to hear the mockery in Lin Yuan's words. Master Xuan was furious to the extreme, but not only did he not fly into a rage, he even calmed down. His gaze fell on Lin Yuan as he began to think to himself. This black snake had forced the freedom courtyard again and again, even now using words to fan the flames. His goal was to cause conflict between the freedom courtyard and him, so that the freedom courtyard would be included in the ranks of traitors. But Master Xuan truly could not understand. The freedom courtyard was a sect guarded by 3 void realm experts. Even if this black snake's battle prowess could not be measured by cultivation, he had only just entered the Mountain Lord realm. Where did he find the courage to clamor with him? Could it be that, what else did this black snake rely on? After pondering for a moment, Master Xuan suddenly smiled bitterly and said, "Your Excellency Dragon King, please stop. I thought about it for a moment. These ambitious people dared to do such a disrespectful thing because they have some tricks up their sleeves. Although Freedom Yard is a little famous in the northern region, I dare not say that I'm the leader. Perhaps there are some evil creatures hiding in the inner temple by some unscrupulous means. Please enter the temple and search. In this way, everyone can deal with the matter at hand with peace of mind." His face was already swollen from the slap, so this last trembling was not a big deal. Even though Master Xuan did not know what the black snake was relying on, he was sure that the black snake would not let it go so easily. If he did not shut the black snake's mouth today, the freedom courtyard would not be able to escape from his evil claws in the future. Even if the black snake wanted to completely destroy the freedom courtyard, he did not have the ability to do so now. Today he searched the inner temple only to make the freedom courtyard pay a large sum of money when they moved away from the northern frontier. Even though he felt the pinch, they did not lack this kind of thing. The remnants of the sects were wiped out? How could that be possible? Even if the black snake really wiped out 99% of the sects in the northern frontier, so what? As long as there was still a place for sects to grow in the northern frontier, the black snake would not let it go. When the time came, those sect's disciples who had betrayed the association of the demon emperor could jump out at any time to make trouble for the black snake. The freedom courtyard might be able to suppress the black snake today, but it was hard to say what would happen in the future. After all, in less than a year and a half, the black serpent had grown from an ordinary beast to a mountain lord. It could no longer be considered a genius. Compared to normal cultivation, the black serpent's speed of advancement was indeed like the reincarnation of a great monster that had survived from ancient times until now, gradually recovering the cultivation of its predecessor. As soon as the doors to the inner temple opened, the well-prepared guards of the northern region immediately filed in. They did not even bother to exchange pleasantries with the cultivators of the freedom courtyard. They either barged their way to other places or began to rummage through chests and cabinets. What was even more outrageous was that the people rummaging through chests and cabinets did not even spare the small drawers. Was that a place where a person could hide? Even a baby could not fit in a small drawer. If a person could hide in a small drawer, they would have been cut up and stuffed in. Lin Yuan did not join the search. After all, with the existence of the Eye of God, all the movements of the freedom courtyard were under his control. Whether there were people hiding in it naturally could not be hidden from his eyes. Many thanks for Venerable Master's understanding. Lin Yuan nodded slightly at Venerable Xuan, then said in a low voice, "Since that is the case, this king believes that Venerable Master is not in cahoots with those rebels. When this king meets with the king of the northern frontier, he will naturally speak on Venerable Master's behalf. In the future, if I have the chance to visit the Freedom Courtyard again, this king will definitely prepare a generous gift for Venerable Master as an apology." Lord Dragon King is too courteous. As a member of the northern frontier, this humble monk will naturally not sit by and watch these rebels commit crimes and do nothing. This humble monk is already ashamed of his negligence. How can I blame Lord Dragon King? Although Venerable Xuan could not even smile, he still had to say those hypocritical words. His face had already been beaten to such a state by the black snake. If he were to start a conflict because of his words, then wouldn't his forbearance today be for naught? More than 180 monthly votes plus more chapters. Chapter 366. This king still has important matters to attend to, so I'll take my leave first. Lin Yuan once again nodded at Master Xuan. Then, with a shake of his body, he soared into the sky and flew directly in the direction of Shunning City. Firstly, he really did have important matters to attend to. Secondly, he really did not want to stay here any longer. The strength of the Freedom Courtyard was much stronger than Lin Yuan had initially predicted. At least, before Lin Yuan used his trump card, the Northern Frontier Guard Army would definitely not be able to contend against the Freedom Courtyard. However, Master Xuan, without knowing whether or not Lin Yuan had a trump card and what his trump card was cautious and patient. Lin Yuan was even worried that if he continued to stay here, he might not be able to hold back his laughter. At that time, no matter how good Master Xuan's self-comforting skills were, he would not have a good ending today. Although the sword had been drawn, it had not reached the stage where blood would be spilled. After all, the forces with Void Nether Realm cultivators were still as stable as Mount Tai. Even if the sects below were divided into first, second, and third-rate forces, they were actually just a bunch of fellows that depended on them. If he could not uproot or expel these sects with Void Nether Realm cultivators, then it would be useless even if he killed a lot of people today. Sects were no different from aristocratic families. As long as the limelight passed, there would be countless sects that would be re-established. In this aspect, even aristocratic families would admit that they were inferior. After all, if an aristocratic family wanted to establish itself, they would need to find a bunch of relatives who were more or less related to them by blood. It was not like a family of 3 that could raise a few guests or consecrators to be called an aristocratic family. At that level they would at most be called a tyrant or a nouveau riche. 4 hours later. Lin Yuan had already soared into the sky and arrived at the Northern Frontier Prince's mansion in Shunning City. This newly built Northern Frontier Prince's mansion was not a small project. It was even larger than all of the Dragon King temples that Lei Fan had built for Lin Yuan in the Northern Frontier. However, these 2 projects were completed at the same time in less than 3 days. After all, the current situation was chaotic. Although not everyone dared to make a fortune in this chaos, there were still many people who wanted to get some soup. The Xuanhu dynasty was not just simply at war with the 2 dynasties. Even within its own territory there were wars everywhere. Not to mention the small scale, there were 7 or 8 warlords like Lei Qiuming who had hundreds of thousands of troops. However, most of them were sects, bandits, and aristocratic families. Their fighting strength was naturally incomparable to the professionally trained army of Lei Qiuming. Compared to the chaotic scene in the south, the northern frontier, which had been unified by Lin Yuan long ago, had become one of the few places in the Xuanhu dynasty that could be called a paradise. Some of the dignitaries and big shots had bought houses in the northern frontier and moved their descendants to the northern frontier. They did not expect to be able to take root in the northern frontier, but only hoped to leave behind a bloodline in this chaotic world. As for those commoners who did not have any background, they even flocked to the northern frontier. Even if they were homeless, it was still better than not knowing when their heads would be chopped off. It was better to be a dog in peace than a person in chaos. This sentence was painted in blood between the other regions of the Xuanhu dynasty and the northern frontier. However, the luck of these refugees was not bad. After all, the northern frontier was in the process of reform and needed a large number of people to help out everywhere. As long as they were not lazy and gluttonous, not only would they not be able to eat in the northern frontier, they would even earn more than they did in their hometowns. Most importantly, Lin Yuan had no intention of spitting out the refugees that he had eaten. Not only did he give these refugees wages and food, he also set up many new gathering places in the northern frontier to help these refugees settle down. In any case, the gathering places in the northern frontier did not need to be built with city walls. At the beginning, they only needed to build some stone and wood houses that could shelter them from the wind and rain. The amount of work was not that big. Under the condition that they were provided with food, these refugees worked hard to build houses for themselves. Of course, it was also because of the labor of these refugees that not only were the Northern Frontier Prince's mansion and the Dragon King's temple completed, even the construction of the Northern Frontier Academy, which Lin Yuan had bared his fangs to the aristocratic clans and sects to cultivate talents for himself, had been greatly improved. Originally there were 7 cities in the northern frontier. Excluding Xianxia city, which had been completely wiped out after the census of the population and the redistribution of housing, there were now 21 public residences in the northern frontier. The first phase of Lin Yuan's Northern Frontier Academy was to set up a headquarters in these 21 residences. When the residences were further developed in the future, the headquarters would apply for funds from the Northern Frontier Prince's Mansion to set up their own branch academy. As time passed, Lin Yuan was sure that no one would reject an academy that provided free tuition, food and lodging, and even cultivation resources for those who performed well. The existence of the Northern Frontier Academy was the reason why Lin Yuan had the confidence to swallow these refugees. What did the prosperity of a land, a city, and a country depend on? It was the population. In the history of his previous world, there had once been the painful lesson of the 5 barbarians' rebellion. It was because the warlords of that time were fighting amongst each other, which had almost wiped out the entire population. Otherwise, how could a bunch of foreign races who had been blocked outside the grasslands have the right to enter the divine lands and strut around? However, the implementation of the Northern Frontier policy was one thing. But family matters still had to be settled. At that moment, Lin Yuan was sitting cross-legged on a soft cushion prepared by the servants of the prince's mansion. His pair of heterochromatic eyes stared coldly at Lei Fan's face, and his voice carried a hint of mockery as he laughed coldly. "King of the Northern Frontier, you have calculated that this king will not be able to leave the secret realm, and so you are in a hurry to control the authority of the Northern Frontier?" Seated on an armchair, Lei Fan's movements stiffened slightly as a brilliant glint flashed across his purple eyes. Raising his head, he smiled and said, "Lord Demon Emperor, what are you saying? You're already in existence that's going to create a new era. How can a mere heavenly dipper realm cultivator stop your footsteps? If Lord Dragon King were to really die in the secret realm, that would be out of my expectations." "Then you explain to me. All these people, how did they die?" Lin Yuan shot a glance at Lei Fan, the coldness in his eyes growing even more intense, and even his voice sounded a little more forceful. Hu Yin, who was standing by the side, reached out his hand to wipe off the cold sweat on his forehead, and took a step forward to pass a white envelope into Lei Fan's hands. After that, he lowered his head and went back to his seat, looking indifferently at the 2 big bosses of the Northern Frontier who controlled lightning and thunder. In his heart, he had already made up his mind that no matter what happened today, he would bury this matter in his stomach. Chapter 367. Lei Fan put down the teacup in his hand and opened the white envelope with both hands. It was a list of names. With just a quick glance, Lei Fan's entire body shook, and large amounts of cold sweat broke out on his forehead. The names on the list were not anything that could not be exposed. They were all officials who had been assigned to various positions in the Northern Frontier during this period of time to implement the new laws of the Northern Frontier. They had not been conferred titles by the Xuanhuan dynasty, and they were originally the 7 mayors and the various aristocratic families groomed for roles such as housekeepers and servants. Because they had a certain level of ability, Lin Yuan had made an exception and transferred them to wear the robes of officials. They could be said to be the cornerstone of the Northern Frontier. However, this list of names was the same batch of officials that Lei Fan had used various excuses to kill in the past few days. It was not that these people had any grudges with Lei Fan, but they were Lin Yuan's most staunch supporters, and they completely followed the principle that all things were equal. After all, they had been housekeepers and had become officials today. Although their status was still far from their former masters, but at least they had the right to speak to them as equals, and did not need to kneel on the ground and call themselves servants or servants. But including Lei Fan, the 7 mayors of the past had never taken this rule seriously. After all, they were all from a privileged class, whether it was in the past or now. But if they allowed this rule to continue to develop, they would lose all their privileges sooner or later, and even some of the more outstanding grassroots would be able to climb to a position higher than theirs in the future. Taking the opportunity that Lin Yuan was trapped in the mystic realm, Lei Fan had unhesitatingly waved his butcher's knife at those staunch supporters of this rule. Although he did not do it openly, but anyone with a discerning eye would know why Lei Fan had targeted those people on the list. Of course, Lei Fan had done this because he felt that Lin Yuan would not be able to get out. Although Xianxia did not have any ill feelings towards Lin Yuan, and was even very interested in the new policies that Lin Yuan had implemented, the ones who were truly implementing these new policies were still Lei Fan and the 7 others. Even if Lin Yuan had died in the mystic territory, as long as Lei Fan kept most of the new policies in place, he would still be able to gain the support of Xianxia. In addition to the existence of his own Lei family bloodline, Even if the Xuanhu dynasty had quelled the chaos in the future, he would still be able to retain a considerable amount of authority in the northern frontier. Furthermore, xianxia was an existence that was on par with Lei Qiusheng. No matter if it was his foresight or his methods, no ordinary person could compare to him. No matter how extraordinary Lin Yuan was, it would be difficult for him to convince someone like xianxia. After all, as a demonic beast, Lin Yuan was a huge hidden danger in xianxia's eyes. If it wasn't for the fact that Lin Yuan was a demonic beast, based on the things that Lin Yuan had done, xianxia would have already stood behind Lin Yuan. But Lei Fan would never have thought that not only had Lin Yuan managed to convince xianxia, he had also come out so quickly. In just 2 days' time, Lin Yuan had walked out from the mystic territory. Other than his power having increased by another step, there was also an aura about him that Lei Fan had never felt before. I was the one who did it, so what? Now that things had come to this, Lei Fan could only brace himself to meet Lin Yuan's gaze and say in a deep voice, "Black Snake, although you are a demonic beast, but I must admit that you are indeed a mighty lord with great talent and bold vision. Your new policies also have many merits. But I hope that before you make your decision, you will at least consider our opinions? What do you think that we are willing to risk our lives to help you do all these things for? For the northern frontier to prosper, for peace and prosperity? Go on." Lin Yuan's gaze rested on Lei Fan's face for a moment, but he did not fly into a rage immediately, but instead replied with an indifferent tone. "The 600,000 soldiers of the Northern Frontier Guard Legion wish to achieve great things, to free themselves from their current status as bumpkins, to become one of the upstart nobles of the Northern Frontier. But the laughable thing is, they are completely unaware that we, the so-called upstart nobles of the Northern Frontier, are still standing under the butcher's knife of you, the great demon emperor." Lei Fan was so angry that he started to laugh, and he continued to say, "Taking back all the privileges in our hands, how did you come up with this idea? That's equivalent to saying that we have risked our lives to make the Northern Frontier better and better, but we are the ones who are going to get worse and worse? Then I might as well let the Northern Frontier maintain its current state." Cough. Hu Yen cleared his throat as if he wanted to say something, but when his gaze rested on the two big bosses for a moment, he let go of those little schemes in his heart and just pretended that his throat was not feeling well, and continued to stand at the same spot. After all, the Northern Frontier Guard Legion was currently relying on these two big bosses to survive. Although the 600,000 soldiers of the Northern Frontier Guard Legion were not all Lei Fan's personal soldiers, but they were indeed trained by Li Zhongxing and Zhang Qilin under Lei Fan's command. More or less there was still some kinship between them. Therefore, when Lei Fan ordered the Northern Frontier Guard Legion to do what he wanted, it was far more useful than the other 6 city lords. As for Lin Yuan, he was now the guardian god of the Northern Frontier, the god of fortune. In the eyes of the refugees and ordinary people, the Northern Frontier that was undergoing reform was like gold everywhere, and as long as they put in some effort, they would be able to earn riches that they would never have dared to dream of in the past. But wasn't this gold that was spread everywhere by Lin Yuan, and it was distributed by the people who made the decisions? No matter if it was without Lin Yuan or Lei Fan, the Northern Frontier Guard Legion would be greatly weakened, and might even be swallowed up by others like a piece of fat meat. Presumably, these two big bosses, Hu Yen, the former city lord of Shunning City, and the current chief secretary of the Northern Frontier Guard Legion, could only stand aside and listen. "The privileges you speak of, what are you referring to? You want me to give you a large piece of land in the Northern Frontier Guard Legion, and let you build your own country, China?" Lin Yuan's snake tail swayed gently and he said in a calm voice, "Then what's the difference between your privileges and the aristocratic families? If I were to set you as an example, what would the others think? After I've dealt with the aristocratic families and sects in the Northern Frontier Guard Legion, and then watch you all become a new aristocratic family, then what's the point of me doing all this? Or could it be that even you yourself feel that what you're doing now is completely useless?" Lei Fan was at a loss for words, not knowing how to answer Lin Yuan. Although since ancient times, it was always the new rulers who suppressed the old aristocratic families and sects, and then the new aristocratic families and sects would be formed by the new rulers, unless it was a super aristocratic family like the Qiao family. Otherwise, once there was a new ruler, the local powers would usually be swallowed up by others. But if Lin Yuan were to use this method to distribute them out, then it would mean that all the hard work they had done during this period of time would be for naught, because the aristocratic families would still not be under his control. Even if Lin Yuan were to really die in the mystic realm, Lei Fan's right to speak in the Northern Frontier Guard Legion would not reach the level he had imagined.